Chapter 641. Shui was about to turn to look at the spirit field when she saw a man dressed in green meditating in a pile of weeds not far away. It was Zhou Shuming whom she had seen in the hall previously. Her gaze darkened. The person meditating there seemed to have sensed the arrival as well, and woke up from his meditation, turning to look at the two people at the entrance. Seeming to recognize Steward he frowned and walked over with cupped fists. "Greetings, senior brother this. Senior sister." Shui immediately kept the murderous intent in her heart, and gave him a reassuring smile. "You're the junior brother in charge of this spirit field?" "That's right," Zhou Shuming replied and turned to look at Steward he. "Is senior brother he here to collect the 50 stalks of spirit herbs?" "I guess so." Steward he then turned to look at Zhou Shuming in shock. His breathing was a little hurried as he raised his voice and asked, This spirit field, you planted it?" Zhou Shuming nodded. "I planted it with junior brother Lone Moon." "How could this be?" Steward he raised his voice even more. Shu Yi's gaze darkened. A hint of a smile flashed across her eyes, as if certain that he would make things difficult for her. She immediately stepped forward with a sympathetic expression. "Senior brother you can't blame this junior brother for this. He clearly knew that this place is remote, and the spirit chi is thin, yet he still arranged for people to plant here. It's not fair in the first place. How can he expect good spirit herbs to grow?" Steward he faltered and subconsciously retorted. "No, junior sister Shu I know what you want to say." Shui interrupted him with a pained expression. "Gui Sek's rules have indeed always been strict, but this is pardonable. If you really want to pursue this, I don't mind telling this directly to my father, and let him judge." Steward he was stunned for a moment, not knowing what to say. "Wait a minute, what is this all about?" Shui thought that he was stunned. This sect was indeed a bunch of people who bullied the weak and feared the strong. A trace of coldness flashed across her heart, but her expression did not change. She still stepped forward worriedly, and looked at Zhou Shuming. "This junior brother, I know you've tried your best. But senior brother he is not wrong. Gui sect has its own rules. How about this?" She pulled out a storage pouch. "I just happen to have 100 low-grade spirit herbs here. How about I help you turn in your harvest for this season?" She handed it over with a sincere expression. "Zhou Shuming, Steward Lone Moon, I Ching." The entire place fell silent for some reason. Zhou Shuming suddenly understood what Brother Lone Moon meant when they were cultivating. Brother Lone Moon often called him a retard. He glanced at the bag in her hand, and subconsciously took a step back. Brother Lone Moon said that mental retardation was contagious. What happened? Seeing that he didn't take it, Shu Yi's smile became even more gentle and kind. "How about I lend it to junior brother?" Zhou Shuming then looked up at the woman in front of him, his gaze filled with complex emotions. He frowned and struggled for a moment before saying seriously, "Young lady, are you sick?" "What?" Shu Yi's hand froze instantly. Before he could react, the other party turned to look at Steward he at the side, and said with a serious expression, "Senior brother this junior sister should be sick. Your cultivation is high. Why don't you take a look at this senior sister?" He said seriously, his face full of worry. There was no teasing in it at all. He was really worried about the other party's health. "I think she most likely hurt her brain." "What did you say?" Shui directly broke through. The gentleness and kindness on her face disappeared instantly, and a murderous aura surged out. "Uft." Lone Moon, who had been watching the show, finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Brother Lone Moon." Zhou Shuming's expression lit up, and he hurriedly waved at him. "Steward he is here to harvest the spirit herbs. Let's hurry and harvest this land." With that said, he turned and walked towards the land. "Don't move." Steward he suddenly exclaimed. His voice was so loud that it almost broke his voice. As if he had just woken up and realized what he should do, he grabbed Zhou Shuming tightly, and said with a nervous expression, "Don't move. I'll go inform sect master now. Remember, before I come back, the spirit herbs in this land. No, don't touch even half of them, understand?" These were mutated spirit herbs. He had been managing the spirit fields for more than 100 years, and had never seen them before. What's more, there were mutated spirit herbs. Although they were low level, Their effects were already comparable to high-level spirit herbs. And they were priceless. He already didn't have time to think why such a piece of spirit field could grow mutated spirit herbs. He only knew that if he touched them, he wouldn't be able to bear even a single leaf. With that said, he hurriedly summoned his flying sword and flew towards the direction of the main peak. Before he left, he didn't forget to repeatedly instruct. Don't touch them, don't ever touch them. Don't ever, Swashumming. Lone Moon. Was there a need to? Even the weeds in their invincible sex-back mountain were more high-level than these. On the other hand, Shui at the side finally shifted her gaze to the spirit field in front of her. Then she was completely stunned. Looking at the densely packed spirit herbs in front of her, she couldn't react for a long time. She didn't know enough about spirit herbs and couldn't tell what these were. But looking at Stewart He's attitude just now, she understood that not only did Swashumming grow the spirit herbs, he grew them very well. How could this be? This was clearly a piece of barren land. Even the spirit chi here was pitifully low. How could he grow spirit herbs? If Swashumming had already grown spirit herbs, then didn't she just? Her expression darkened even more. In an instant, boundless anger surged in her heart. Swashumming was indeed a despicable person. He had clearly grown spirit herbs, and yet he still watched her make a fool of herself. He was deliberately watching her make a fool of herself. In an instant, the murderous intent in her eyes intensified. As if she could shoot out a knife, she stabbed it directly in Swashumming's direction. Yet a certain silly sweet person completely didn't receive the other party's death stare. He looked up at the direction that Stewart he flew off to without feeling anything. He sighed and said, "Seems like I have to wait for senior brother he to return before I can collect them." With that said, he was about to return to that pile of weeds to continue cultivating when he thought of something, and turned to look at Shui beside him. This senior sister. Shui didn't expect him to suddenly turn back. Before she could retract her venomous gaze, her expression stiffened. Her face instantly contorted. A moment later, she squeezed out a voice. "What, junior brother? The spirit field is simple and crude. Why don't you rest on this pile of weeds first?" He looked at the weeds beside him. Shui was shocked. She didn't expect him to actually invite her. She was just about to reject him when Swashumming suddenly added in all seriousness, "After all, you don't look well." With that said, he even pointed and said, "You have to rest well. Shui, you're the one who's sick in the head. Your whole family is sick. For all." Her expression instantly twitched. "I'm going to kill him. Kill him. Now, immediately, right now." "Host, calm down. He can't die now. The original owner's mission hasn't been completed." Chapter 642. You still dare to mention a mission? Shui was fuming and replied in her mind. What's going on with this spirit field? Didn't they say that this is the place with the weakest spirit chi? Why is he still able to grow spirit herbs? And they're not ordinary spirit herbs. I don't know about this either, but this is a high-level immortal cultivation world. The heavenly Tao is much stronger than other low-level worlds. And he was someone who had ascended in his previous life. Those who could ascend must be blessed by the heavenly Tao. Senior sister? Seeing that she wasn't replying, Swashumming asked again. Shui took a few deep breaths, then gritted her teeth, and replied to Swashumming, "No need." Oh. Swashumming didn't mind. He wasn't familiar with her anyway. He turned and continued to cultivate. She then continued to ask 001. What exactly are the spirit herbs in this field? Why was that he guy so nervous just now? This field seems to be full of mutated spirit herbs, and some are advanced spirit herbs. All of them? That's right. It seems like this Swashumming must have some trump card. Shuyi's expression darkened. Maybe he got some other opportunity. 001, can you skin anything on him now? No. If I scan him directly, the heavenly Tao will detect it. Her expression darkened even more. Forget it, we'll find out eventually. Lone Moon. I Ching. Speaking of which, the invader's habit of turning on the public speaker. No, the broadcast really couldn't be changed? They really didn't want to be spoiled. What exactly was she planning next? Lone Moon sighed, then turned to look at the spirit field in front of him. Others could only see rows of mutated or advanced spirit herbs, but in his eyes, The entire spirit field was covered with a thick layer of nomological power. There seemed to be countless tiny voices muttering beside each spirit herb. Grow faster, grow faster, grow faster. Grow prettier, grow better. Hurry, hurry, hurry. The corner of Loneman's mouth twitched. He immediately turned to look at Chef, who was equally speechless, and sent a voice transmission. Chef. Chef nodded, then looked up at a certain spot in the sky and said, "It's done." Then a soft voice sounded in their ears at the same time. "Yes, boss, no problem, boss. Good comments." In the next moment, the nomological power surrounding the spiritual field dissipated. Originally, he didn't know how long it would take for Steward He to return after leaving. Unexpectedly, in less than a quarter of an hour, several figures flew over from the main peak. The person walking in front looked familiar. It was the sect leader of Guei sect. Behind him were a few nascent soul cultivators. They seemed to be the elders of the various peaks of Guei sect. They had also met in the main hall that day. The moment they landed on the ground, they stared at the spiritual field in front of them with their eyes wide open in disbelief. It's really a mutated spiritual plant." The sect leader's face was full of excitement. "Not only that," another nascent soul elder said excitedly. "Quick, look at that spirit plant. One leaf has 7 colors. This is an advanced spirit plant. And it's at least 2 levels higher. This is the first time I've seen so many mutated spiritual plants at once." The sect leader was so excited that his hands were trembling. He hurriedly pulled the steward who reported the news over. "Fu, who did you say planted this land?" Replying sect leader. "It's an outer sect disciple called Zwishuming." Steward He did not dare to hide anything, and hurriedly replied with cupped fists. Everyone then recovered from their excitement, and glanced at Lone Moon, and Zwishuming at the side. "Greetings, sect leader, elders." The two of them could only step forward and bow. The Guei sect leader sized them up, and finally fixed his gaze on Zwishuming, who was at the perfected chi refinement stage. "You planted this spirit plant?" Replying sect leader, "I planted it with Brother Lone Moon." Zwishuming replied. A hint of admiration flashed across the Guei sect leader's eyes. He was in no hurry to take credit for himself. He was a good seedling. "Do you know that our Guei sect has not had a mutated spirit plant for thousands of years? Although these are all low-level, their effects are comparable to high-level spirit plants. Are you willing to hand all these spirit plants over to the sect?" He asked in a low voice. After thinking for a moment, he added, "Of course, we will pay you." Zwishuming turned back to look at Lone Moon. Seeing that he had no intention of objecting, he then replied, "These spirit plants were arranged by the sect to be planted. Naturally, they should be handed over to the sect." Besides, he had yet to start learning pill refinement. Spirit plants were actually of no use to him. Good. The sect leader's gaze became more satisfied. "I will calculate the amount, and then transfer the spirit stones to you according to the market price. Both of you have good temperaments. From now on, you can join my main peak and become official disciples." Zwishuming's expression instantly brightened. He was about to reply when Shui panicked. She exclaimed anxiously, "No!" The sect leader faltered. He then saw Shui at the side. "A little E is here too. Why are you?" He was about to ask when an urgent cry came from above. "Where are the mutated and advanced spirit plants?" In the next moment, a person with soul formation spirit chi flew over hurriedly. A figure instantly appeared beside everyone. "Greetings, Uncle Master Tiani." All the nascent souls bowed. The person who came was the soul formation cultivator, who almost took Zwishuming into Danxiao Mountain. Tiani ignored them. Instead, he turned to stare at the spirit plants all over the ground. He muttered in disbelief. Mutated spirit plants are extremely rare. There are actually so many of them here at once. And there are advanced spirit plants too. His expression was agitated. Mutated spirit plants were precious, not only because their effects were comparable to high-level spirit plants. Instead, it was because they had a fusion attribute. They could better fuse with other medicinal properties. They could directly increase the success rate of pills by 10%. Advanced spirit plants could even directly increase the effects of pills. They could even directly refine supreme-grade pills. Who planted all these? As a soul formation supremacy, Tian could not hide the excitement in his heart. He hurriedly asked, "It's these two disciples." The sect master pointed at Lone Moon and Zhuo Shuming. Tian turned and glanced at the two of them, his gaze fixed on Zhuo Shuming, who had a higher cultivation. A trace of confusion flashed across his face. This disciple looked rather familiar, but he could not recall where he had seen him. He directly said, all right, from today onwards, the two of you can directly go to my Danxia mountain. He could grow mutated spirit plants once. Who knows, he might be able to grow them a second time." Once he said that, the sect master did not say anything. Shu Yin at the side became even more anxious. No, if Zhuo Shuming went to Danxia mountain, wouldn't all her previous efforts be for nothing? Little Yi is here too. Tian glanced at Shu Yi. Why not? Because. Shu Yi's face paled. Her gaze shifted. She then replied, because sect master had already asked them to go to the main peak. Anyway, she definitely could not let Zhuo Shuming go to Danxia mountain. Oh, really? Tian turned to look at the sect master. The sect master faltered. How would he dare to snatch people from Uncle Master? But at this point, he could only bite the bullet and nod. Chapter 643. Forget it then. Tian dispelled the thought of snatching her away unhappily. He looked at Shu Yi and then at Zhuo Shuming, suddenly recalling, wasn't this disciple the one he almost accepted into Danxia mountain that day? It seemed like he gave up on this idea, because Shu Yi said something back then. He frowned, suspicion rising in his heart. But Shu Yi was the daughter of a nascent soul elder after all. He did not say anything in front of her. Uncle Master, these spirit herbs, how should we harvest them? The sect master looked at him inquiringly. Of course, mutated spirit herbs are different from other spirit herbs. He conjured a seal with both hands and set up several array formations around the spirit field. I'll use the array formation to lock the spirit chi in the surroundings. Wait for me to get the spirit lock box. With that said, he hurriedly flew back in a flash. After a while, he carried a box and flew back. He then turned to the nervous crowd and said, you can start harvesting now. Don't get too close, in case you affect the spirit chi of the spirit herbs. He then carefully walked towards the red level 2 mutated spirit herb at the side. Zhuo Shuming looked at the nervous expressions of so many mighty cultivators. He could not help but turn to look at Lone Moon. His expression enlightened. Brother Lone Moon, no wonder you don't let me near these spirit herbs usually. You're so particular about it. Lone Moon. He was just worried that the heavenly Tao would think that he was the one who planted them. The 7 to 8 high-level cultivators around the spirit field carefully dug for a long time, before finally digging out the roots of the first spirit herb. Lone Moon was tired watching. It was just plucking spirit herbs. Was there a need to be so careful? Alright, it's done. Tian then grabbed the spirit herb and pulled it up with a little strength before taking it out. He hurriedly put it into the spirit lock box. He was about to continue digging for the next one. Suddenly, a strong burst of spirit energy erupted from the ground. The pitifully thin spirit chi in the surroundings instantly thickened by tens of times, almost condensing into a physical substance. White fog appeared in the surroundings, as if it was about to condense into immortal chi. With a whoosh, a white light shot out from the ground and disappeared in an instant. That's a spirit vein. The Guei sect master immediately reacted and exclaimed, it's a living spirit vein. Chase. Tian Yi's figure flashed and directly chased in the direction where the flash disappeared. A few nascent soul cultivators were a step slower, but they immediately chased after them. At that moment, only the Guei sect leader was left in the spiritual field. He also wanted to chase after them, but there had to be someone to look after these spiritual herbs. A complete living spirit vein would never surface, so it was extremely difficult to see it, let alone capture it. The so-called spirit veins of the various sects were actually just broken veins, just a portion of a spirit vein. However, that was a real living spirit vein. No wonder so many variant spirit plants had suddenly appeared here. It turned out that there was an entire spirit vein hidden here. Lone Moon glanced sideways at Chef. What was he doing? I Ching's expression darkened. He looked up at the sky and asked, what's going on? Didn't you say you could keep it? Another voice filled with endless grievance sounded in his ears. Sob, 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 sob. Wasn't it because the spirit vein had curled up in this small spirit field for too long and had fallen asleep? Leader, don't be angry. I was wrong. Lone Moon. TSK. The heavenly Tao of this plane was as unreliable as its master. He was indeed taught by Shening, a prodigal disciple. In the house far away, Shening was sprawled on the bed like a big pancake. Achoo! She raised her hand to touch her head. What was going on? Did she catch a cold? It must be because she ate too little. Her immune system had weakened. Speaking of which, when was Chef coming back to cook? The Guei sect leader grew more anxious the longer he waited. Seeing that everyone had yet to return, he suddenly wanted to chase after them to take a look. He was just about to call a few disciples to guard the spirit field. The surrounding spirit chi suddenly became restless and started to gather towards the right. He subconsciously turned to look and saw that all the spirit chi had gathered around Zhuo Shuming. $2 Zhuo. Lone Moon shouted and pushed him. Why are you in a daze? Ha! Zhuo Shuming faltered, completely unable to react. You're going to Foundation Establishment. The sect leader paused in his steps and scanned him from head to toe. He reminded, hurry up and focus on meditating. Focus on Foundation Establishment. Only then did he react. He hurriedly sat down and started to focus on absorbing spirit chi. The surrounding spirit chi gathered even thicker and kept rushing into his meridians. Perhaps because he was used to being beaten up by Lone Moon these 3 months, his expression did not show much pain, and his absorption of spirit chi was also very smooth. The Guei sect leader nodded his head in satisfaction. Although this disciple's spirit root was a bit lacking, his temperament was not bad. If he could succeed in reaching Foundation Establishment this time, he would not be a useless person. Thus, he helped him set up a formation. Shu Yi, on the other hand, had a face of disbelief. Her expression turned even worse. How could this be? She had clearly stopped him from entering Danxia Mountain. Without Supremacy Tianyi's guidance, why did he still reach Foundation Establishment, and 2 years faster than before? Foundation Establishment in a short 3 months. How was that possible? Could it be that she had helped him by not letting him enter Danxia Mountain? The more Shui thought about it, the angrier she got. But in her heart, she was even more determined that he must have had other opportunities. That's right. He must have other Dharma treasures. Otherwise, he would not be so fast. Definitely. For a moment, the few people who were left had different expressions. They all looked at Zhuo Shuming nervously. However, the Guei sect leader was worried that his aptitude was not high. He was afraid that he would fail in Foundation Establishment. But Shu Yi was worried that he would not fail. Lone Moon, on the other hand, had a relaxed expression. Not to mention that he had successfully ascended in his previous life. Just in the 3 months he taught him, the strength he used to beat him up was much stronger than the amount of spirit chi injected into him during Foundation Establishment. It was only a matter of time before he reached Foundation Establishment. Tian Yi and the few nascent soul elders did not manage to catch up to the spirit vein that escaped in the end. Once that spirit vein left Guei sect, it disappeared without a trace. It was as abrupt as when it appeared. Spirit veins could only be chanced upon. Although the few of them were slightly disappointed, they did not care too much. They were already very happy to be able to obtain an entire spirit field full of mutated spirit herbs. And Zhuo Shuming had also successfully reached Foundation Establishment. Perhaps it was because of his good foundation. After he reached Foundation Establishment, he only needed to meditate for a night, and he had already stabilized his cultivation. He clenched his hands and excitedly conjured a few spells. Indeed, after his cultivation increased, the effect was completely different. He walked out of the room in surprise. Just as he was about to go next door to look for Brother Lone Moon, he saw the other party pushing the door open and walking out. He immediately went up to him. Brother Lone Moon, you? He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened and he blurted out, You've also reached Foundation Establishment. Lone Moon nodded. He did not seem to mind at all. That's right. Chapter 644. You're going out. Ah, that's right. Zhuo Shuming looked confused. When did Brother Lone Moon reach foundation establishment? He was still in the 6th stage of chi refinement yesterday. Oh, just last night. Just last night? So fast. That's right, is there a problem? Zhou Shuming, who thought he was already fast enough, became listless. No. He suddenly felt that he had some misunderstanding about cultivation. For example, in terms of speed. Where are you going? Lone Moon asked directly. Zhou Shuming perked up and replied. I was about to ask Brother Lone Moon to report to the main peak. There's no hurry, Lone Moon said in a low voice. Follow me to the External Affairs Hall first. External Affairs Hall? He faltered. Yesterday, seeing your brother, he told me that we just have to report to the main peak. There's no need to go to the External Affairs Hall to inform them. Who said I'm going to inform them? Lone Moon glared at him. That's. Of course we're going to get money, Lone Moon replied matter-of-factly. Didn't Sect Master say yesterday that those spirit herbs will be paid for according to the market price? If we don't get it now, what if it's less after this is over? It was safer to keep the spirit stones in his own pocket. After all, he had children to feed. Why are you in a daze? Hurry up and go. Those spirit stones could only be collected by 2 people. Oh right, remember that you still owe me a spirit stone? Since you're considered a friend, I'll add in the interest. When we split the spirit stones later, I'll give you 10% interest, you 40% and I 60%. How could it be calculated like that? Lone Moon and Zhou Shuming received a total of 101,222 superior grade spirit stones. This was a large sum of money even for a nascent soul cultivator, much less a foundation establishment disciple. Zhou Shuming felt his hands trembling, but Lone Moon looked at the bag of spirit stones in disdain, a row of words clearly written on his face. That's all? Wasting my time. Then, she took out an abacus out of nowhere and pulled him along to calculate the accounts. He didn't know why, but the more he listened, the more confused he became. In the end, he only had 1,222 spirit stones. Brother Zhou, I see that you have a bad memory. It's not safe to leave these 1222 spirit stones with you. How about this? I'll take the loss and help you keep it. I'll only charge you 1 spirit stone a day, okay? With the sound of the abacus still ringing in his mind, he subconsciously handed it over. Ah, okay, thank you. You're welcome. We're friends. Keep these 2 spirit stones for your pocket money. Thus, he only had 2 spirit stones left in his hand. All right. You've paid the interest of the spirit stones. But where's the principal of the spirit stone? Oh, here. Thus, he was left with only 1 spirit stone, Shining. I Ching. Oh yes, where did you ask me to go just now? Asked Lone Moon. Zhou Shuming finally reacted. Report to the main peak's disciple hall. Oh then let's go. Okay. He then got up and walked quickly out of the courtyard. His steps were light, and his face was full of excitement, as if he had encountered a great thing. Lone Moon's brows furrowed. He tilted his head and asked the master and disciple who were invisible beside him. Did I go overboard this time? Master and disciple. I'll give you a look of disdain. Feel it yourself. Was it that overboard? Lone Moon raised his brows, and then took out the bag of spirit stones. Then compensate him for your food expenses next month. The master and disciple were shocked, for claws instantly pressed down on his hand. Not overboard, not at all. The accounts are clear and flawless. Father Nyo is honest and honest, he has a very good conscience. Father Nyo is an honest businessman, money is rolling in. Brother Lone Moon. Seeing that he did not come out after a long time, Zhou Shuming could not help but call out. Lone Moon glanced at the master and disciple, then kept the bag of spirit stones. Coming. At least you 2 know your place. Lone Moon and Zhou Shuming successfully entered the main peak, and became official disciples of Guiyi sect. Compared to outer sect disciples, the treatment of official disciples was obviously much better. Although it could not be compared to the personal disciples of those elders, the conditions were considered good. At least each of them had their own courtyard. The surrounding spirit chi was also obviously much thicker. The main peak was also called Danlin Peak. The peak master was the sect master of Guiyi sect Yuan. Guiyi sect was divided into 6 peaks. They were Danlin, Danxia, Danshan, Danzhen, Dansheng and Dangu. From the name, one could tell that this was a sect full of pill cultivators. In the past they did not feel it in the outer sect, but the main peak was filled with all kinds of pill fragrances. And on each peak, there were golden core cultivators giving lectures every day. Every month, there were nascent soul cultivators giving lectures. As long as one was a disciple of the 6 peaks, one could go and listen, but most of the content was about pill refinement, or some mental cultivation techniques for pill cultivators. It was not that there were no other cultivators in the sect, but their cultivation levels were not very high. Among the tens of nascent soul cultivators in the sect, only 3 were not pill cultivators. And on the main peak there was a library. There were all kinds of cultivation techniques, and all kinds of spells. Disciples of the 6 peaks could go and borrow them. Zhuo Shuming was very excited. Disciples like him who had not formally acknowledged a master naturally did not have anyone to guide them. So on the first day he arrived at the main peak, he went to the library. He wanted to choose a few suitable cultivation techniques and spells for himself. He searched seriously for an entire day, but walked back listlessly. He did not bring back a single book. Brother Lone Moon. What is it? Lone Moon glanced at him and frowned in disdain. Why do you look like you're broke? Didn't you go to the library? I did go, but I did not find suitable cultivation techniques. For some reason, the more he looked, the more he felt that those spells were not as profound as the ones Brother Lone Moon taught him. Even with just one look, he knew that they were not as powerful as the ones Brother Lone Moon taught him in the past. Those cultivation techniques seemed to be more shallow? Lone Moon sipped his tea slowly and glanced at him. That's normal. In order to pass down their legacy, the higher-level cultivation techniques would naturally be kept in the hands of the higher-level cultivators. They would not easily pass them down. You're not their disciple. Moreover, Gui sect is filled with pill cultivators. High-level cultivation techniques are even more precious. But I don't want to become a pill cultivator. Zhuo Shuming frowned. You don't want to become a pill cultivator? Lone Moon glanced at him. If you don't want to become a pill cultivator, why did you come to Gui sect? Then what do you want to cultivate? Zhuo Shuming thought about it carefully and touched his empty storage bag. Then he said hesitantly, pills, talismans, arrays and weapons are all more. He suddenly thought of something and his eyes lit up. That's right, I can cultivate the sword. I want to become a sword cultivator. Puffed. Lone Moon spat out the tea in his mouth. He slammed the table and stood up. I dare you to say that again. Was he hallucinating? For all. Chapter 645. Zhuo Shuming jumped back in shock, but still answered honestly. I want to be a sword cultivator. Really? Lone Moon was even more excited. He directly grabbed his collar and said word by word. Are you sure you want to be a sword cultivator, not a body cultivator? A sword cultivator? What the hell was a body cultivator? Is there a problem? Lone Moon suddenly froze. An indescribable strange expression appeared on his face, as if something was about to burst out of his eyes. After a while, he let go of his collar and said seriously, No problem at all. Sword cultivators are the best. You're very suitable for it, very suitable. After so many years, finally had a disciple who wanted to cultivate the sword. He wanted to cry. Really? Zhuo Shuming's expression brightened. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed. But there are no sword cultivators in our sect. There are very few books on sword techniques in the library, but I do. Lone Moon directly interrupted him, his entire being excited. Sword techniques, right? What do you want? Heaven, earth, mystic, yellow, all levels. Oh right, you have a triple spirit root of water, wood and fire. Learn the mist sword technique first. You're the most suitable for foundation establishment. And you're old. You have to catch up with body cultivation. Only then can you unleash the full potential of your sword techniques. Of course you can't practice too much. If you practice too much, you'll become a body cultivator, like those invincible sect metal Barbies. And you can try to find a natal dermic artifact now. This will help you understand sword chi. He poured out a lot of things. Zhuo Shuming listened with a confused expression. He just wanted to cultivate the sword. Why did Brother Lone Moon look even more excited than him? Oh right, I remember back then. I think I took from Sun Shu. Exchanged a piece of red flame mystic iron. You happen to have a fire spirit root. Forge it and make it your natal dermic artifact. With that said, he directly took out a palm-sized crystal that was completely red like glass from his storage bag. He also took out a jade slip of the mist sword technique and handed it over. This, Zhou Shuming's eyes widened. He looked at the thing in his hand. Although he had never seen it before, just from the dense spirit chi on it, he knew it was not ordinary. He quickly shook his head and said, "No. Brother Lone Moon has already helped me so much, how can I just take your things? What's more, this thing looks very precious. I'm sure Brother Lone Moon spent a lot of effort to get it. It's fine, we're all swords, we're all friends after all. It didn't take much effort." He had just casually put it in. Zhou Shuming shook his head even more resolutely. "Just because we are friends, all the more I should not take advantage of Brother Lone Moon." Lone Moon scanned him from head to toe and smiled even more happily. "Look at what you're saying. You call me Brother Lone Moon, so there's no need to calculate things so clearly." He directly stuffed the cultivation manual into his hand, patted his shoulder and said, Come, take it. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." But he was still hesitant. "No buts." Lone Moon interrupted her directly and said earnestly, "Don't worry, seeing that we're friends. Why would I make things difficult for you? I know you're in trouble, these cultivation manuals and Dharma artifacts. I'll help you record them first." With that said, his tone changed, and he directly took out a thick account book and flipped through it. One could faintly see the word fatty flashing in front of him. Zhou Shuming. "So this all needs to be calculated?" "That's right. You haven't learned how to forge weapons yet. I'm sure you can't forge this scarlet fire mystic iron into shape. I know a friend, he's quite good at forging weapons. Why don't I ask him to help you forge a spirit sword first? Then you can nourish it into your natal Dharma artifact." Zhou Shuming was dumbfounded, completely unable to react. "It's decided then." Lone Moon kept the crystal directly. "I'll give you a 9% discount on the casting fee, materials fee, cultivation technique fee, intermediary fee and so on. Let's round it up to 5 million supreme grade spirit stones. We're all friends after all. Don't worry, my forging brother is very reliable." Bankrupt friend Zhou Shuming. Reliable forging friend I Ching. Zhou Shuming looked at the cultivation technique jade slip in his hand, unable to react for a long time. Wait, what just happened? Why did he suddenly have a debt of 5 million spirit stones of the highest grade? Things were developing too fast. He couldn't react at all. Today's weather is not bad. Lone Moon, on the other hand, was grinning from ear to ear. It was rare that Lone Moon's eyes were not filled with disdain, but with admiration. "There's no time like the present. Let's start practicing now." Zhou Shuming was still in a daze and subconsciously replied, "But I don't have a spirit sword now, and..." He hadn't seen the contents of this jade slip. "It's okay, I have it." With a swoosh, Lone Moon took out a spirit sword and stuffed it into his hands. "Take it, I'll rent it to you first. It's not expensive, 1 spirit stone a day. We're all friends." He had almost forgotten about the word friend. Junior brother Zhua. Suddenly, a crisp voice came from the door. A pretty girl in pink walked in, and smiled gently at the two. "Congratulations on entering the inner sect, junior brothers. How are you living in the main peak? Do you have any difficulties?" Zhou Shuming turned to look. A trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. He turned and bowed. "Greetings, senior sister Shu Yi." The person who came was that intruder Shu Yi. He didn't know what was wrong with her. Ever since the spirit field incident that day, she would come over from time to time to walk one round in front of Zhou Shuming. Her attitude became gentler and gentler each time, asking about his well-being. The way she looked at Zhou Shuming was also shy and timid. She looked like she was deeply in love. Anyone could tell. Her acting skills were considered superb. It was a pity that Zhou Shuming seemed to be a little blind. "Junior brother Zhua, you don't have to be so polite." Shu Yi smiled even more gently. "Just call me Shu Yi. Etiquette must not be forgotten," he replied seriously. Shu Yi could only sigh and look around. Her gaze swept past Lone Moon, and she said meaningfully, I wonder if junior brother is living well here? There are many disciples on the main peak. I see that the steward of the disciple hall had spent a lot of effort to arrange for the two of you to be next to each other. So this place was arranged by senior sister. Zhou Shuming's eyes lit up, and he said gratefully, "Thank you for your help, senior sister." To be able to stay close to someone he was familiar with, it indeed saved him a lot of trouble. "You're welcome, it was nothing." Shui smiled even more gently. "Oh right. I'm here to inform you that the Peak Lord of Danshan Peak will be personally teaching tomorrow. My father hasn't personally taught for decades. Don't miss it." Chapter 646. Zhou Shuming faltered. It was rare for a Peak Lord to personally conduct a lesson, but they were just disciples who had just entered the inner sect. Their foundations were not solid yet. If they were to listen to the Peak Lord's lesson, not only would they not understand, they might even misunderstand. Therefore, this kind of lecture was usually attended by disciples above the Jindan stage. Moreover, Danshan Peak Master Perfected Xu Yuan was also a pill cultivator. His lessons were probably all about pill cultivators. He had already decided to cultivate the sword, so there was no need for him to listen to a pill cultivator's lesson. Xu Yi came to invite him, a disciple who had just reached foundation establishment, to attend a lecture at Danshan Peak. Was he really sick in the head? He looked at her, a little speechless, but when he thought about how she had informed him out of goodwill, and he wasn't someone who didn't know what was good for him, he cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, senior sister, for telling me about this." After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but add, "Oh right, senior sister, you." He suddenly took a step forward and looked at her face with a conflicted expression. After a while he said seriously, "Your illness. Is it better? Have you seen a doctor recently?" Xu Yi's perfect smile froze. "By the way, your father is a nascent soul-perfected cultivator. Why don't you look for him?" Xu Yi's face began to contort. "I think it's best to treat an illness as soon as possible. Although we are cultivators and our bodies are stronger than mortals, we must not hide our illness for fear of treatment." "Shut up." Xu Yi's gentle expression finally collapsed in an instant. She was like an exploding ball of fur. Pointing at him, she scolded, "You're the one who's sick. Your whole F***king family is sick." "Senior sister." Zhou Shuming was stunned. Why was she suddenly scolding him? "Calm down, host. He's the mission target. You have to hold it in." The system's voice sounded just in time. Shui was so angry that she was muddled. She retorted in her heart, "How do you expect me to calm down? This Zhou Shuming is an idiot. After all I've done, is he blind? Can't you see that I'm seducing him? I think he's the one who's sick. If it weren't for the fact that he might have other fortuitous encounters, I wouldn't even bother with him." After Zhou Shuming successfully entered foundation establishment, the original owner's resentment level increased by another 10 points. If his cultivation catches up to yours, his resentment will increase again. If it exceeds 100 points, the mission will fail. I don't think his cultivation has improved much these few days. It's hard to say whether or not there are any new opportunities. What should the host do now? Should I continue to increase his favorability? Brush my ass. I just want to kill him now. She took a few deep breaths, as if desperately trying to suppress the anger in her heart. It's not like there's only one way to take revenge. Let's get rid of the resentment plants first. With that magic tool, I can immediately form my gold core. I don't believe that his cultivation can surpass mine without his celestial artifact. Good luck, host. Senior sister Shui? Zhou Shuming couldn't help but wave his hand in front of her eyes when he saw that she was suddenly rooted to the ground and staring at him. Was her illness acting up? Get lost. Only then did Xu Yi end the conversation with the system. She slapped his hand away and said, "You scumbag, just you wait." After he finished speaking, he coldly snorted, turned around and stormed out of the door. Zhou Shuming. This senior sister Xu must be sick, right? It seemed to have gotten worse. But why? Brother Lone Moon. He couldn't help but turn and ask with some hesitation. Did I say something wrong just now? Why is senior sister scolding me? Lone Moon turned to look at him. I'm giving you a look to figure it out yourself. Speaking of which, Don't tell me this is how you gained hatred in your previous life, Brother Lone Moon? He was even more confused. You really can't tell that she's been trying to please you these few days? Lone Moon rolled his eyes. Ah. Zhou Shuming's expression was one of disbelief. You mean she likes me? How is that possible? I don't like her? Oh, why is that? Lone Moon looked at him in surprise. Putting aside the fact that she was an intruder, just by looking at Xu Yi's disguise these few days, she was indeed impeccable, gentle, kind and innocent, and her identity was that of a fair, rich and beautiful girl in the cultivation world. To a youth like Zhou Shuming, shouldn't she be the ideal type? Look at the few times she came. She attracted the attention of so many disciples. Those people were even openly and secretly ostracizing Zhou Shuming. Only a naive person like him could not tell. It had to be said that Xu Yi's persona was very successful. There was no one in the entire Guiyi sect who didn't like her. But from Zhou Shuming's words, not only did he not like her, he even seemed to despise her. Because, Zhou Shuming frowned. I can't put my finger on it. Although she looks good and her cultivation is good, I keep feeling that she doesn't seem to be that sincere towards others. Like she's hiding something? I don't want to be close to her. And he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly shuddered. The way she looks at me, for some reason, makes me feel a little cold. Lone Moon faltered and looked at him in surprise. This guy might be silly, but his sixth sense was quite accurate. Since you don't want to be close to her, then just hide from her in the future. Lone Moon said in a low voice. He nodded in agreement. I know. I don't have any feelings for her, so I won't give her unnecessary hope and ruin her happiness for nothing. He thought of something and his face turned red. Finding a Dao companion is better if both parties are willing. Lone Moon turned to pour a cup of tea and asked casually, Oh? Then what do you like? He faltered for a moment, and really started to consider it seriously. After a long while he replied, I think someone like Miss Shin is not bad. Uffed. Lone Moon instantly spat out a mouthful of tea, splashing it all over Zhou Shuming's face. He faltered, and before he could react, he saw Lone Moon stand up instantly and suddenly turn around. His hands and feet gripped the edge of the table tightly. His body swayed unsteadily, as if he was desperately trying to stop something. All of a sudden, he heard a tug sound, as if something was being pulled out of something. The surroundings instantly turned cold. Zhou Shuming wiped the tea off his face and looked at the person who was still gripping the table tightly. He could not help but call out in confusion, Brother Lone Moon? Stop it. Lone Moon turned back and glared at him. What nonsense are you spouting? Chef, calm down. Calm down. He was just giving an example casually. He had no intention of teasing Shining. He put down the sword on Zhou Shuming's neck and kept the sword array. Yet Zhou Shuming had no idea that he had already stepped into the gates of hell. He even courted death by adding, I'm not spouting nonsense. I really feel that Miss Shen. Achoo. He suddenly sneezed and wiped his arm. Why do I suddenly feel so cold? Brother Lone Moon. Chapter 647. Shut up. You'll get colder if you continue. Do you know how hard it is for him to stop her? Shining already has a Dao partner. Don't even think about it. She has a Dao partner so soon. Zhou Shuming was shocked. A trace of regret flashed across his face. But he had only met her a few times after all, so he was not too disappointed. He sighed and said, Someone who is worthy of Miss Shin must be extremely outstanding. Not just outstanding, he also knows how to use a sword. The kind that hangs on your neck. Chef obediently kept his sword. Shining was still napping in the house. Guiyi sect would be destroyed if he woke her up. I Ching's expression turned even colder. After a long while, she slowly put down the sword in her hand. The invisible sword array in the air was also kept. She glared at the little bitch opposite her again. She snorted, turned and walked into the house, cold air emanating from her body. Even the door was pushed open with a bang, giving Zhou Shuming a fright. Is there wind? Lone Moon. No, someone is going crazy. Chef, be gentler. We don't know if Shining is awake yet. I Ching stormed into the house angrily and walked towards the bed. Suddenly, he bent over and hugged a certain someone who was sitting at the head of the bed eating a fruit. He buried his head in the other person's hair. His entire body seemed to be exuding a sense of grievance. Shining, who was suddenly hugged. What's wrong? Lost a quarrel with Father Niao? How many months of living expenses must have been deducted for her to be this aggrieved? $_. Ever since Shu Yi was angered by Zhou Shuming and left, she never came again. She probably gave up on the path of torturing the heart and body, and changed to the path of torturing the body. Lone Moon released his divine perception to sense, and found that she had indeed been in seclusion all this time. In just a few days, her cultivation had already reached the perfected stage of foundation establishment, and there were faint signs that she was about to form a core. He calculated carefully, estimated that she would form her core in these few days. Zhou Shuming's cultivation, on the other hand, did not change since he reached foundation establishment. Although he had been practicing his swordsmanship diligently for the past few days, and he had been studying his swordsmanship very seriously, his cultivation level had not increased. Although this was not slow for a triple spirit root like him, it was still not enough when compared to the invaders. Could it be that little Biao's scale is really that special? Lone Moon frowned in confusion. No matter how weak little Biao is, he's still a celestial emperor. I Ching said in a low voice. The scales that fell from his true body are naturally extraordinary in the lower realm. What's more, those were heart-protecting scales. But no matter how extraordinary it is, it's just a scale. Lone Moon still could not figure it out. Besides, it's been missing for so many years. It's already good enough that it could be refined into an immortal artifact. When did it become beneficial to cultivation? I Ching shook his head. I'm not sure either. Why don't we get another piece from Spoon? Lone Moon suggested. Shening. I Ching. Are you the devil? It's decided then. Every time he heard the intruder's little radio station brag about how good the scale was, he felt annoyed. Wasn't it just scoop scales? You think they don't? So he took out his communication jade token. Remembering that they were in the lower realm, he added an array on the jade token and sent a sliver of immortal chi into it. The next moment, little Biao's image appeared in front of them. Young Emperor Lone Moon. Little Biao's voice rose, and there was a hint of excitement in it. You found my heart-protecting scale. I did find it. Really. Thank you so much, especially exalted goddess. But I can't get it back for now. Lone Moon's tone changed. Little Biao's smile froze. What did he mean? The situation is a little complicated. I can't explain it to you in a few words. We need to know what's so special about your scale in the lower realm. So we decided. Lone Moon coughed and said seriously. To get you to pull out another piece for us to study. What did you say? Pull out another piece? Little Biao's eyes widened as he stood up. Yes, this was Shen Ying's idea. Lone Moon suddenly reached out and grabbed Shening, facing little Biao's image. Shening. Son of AB *th. Little Biao's body trembled reflexively, and then he shrank back. His entire face was twisted into a bitter expression, and he looked like he was about to cry. All right, exalted goddess. No problem, exalted goddess. Oh yes. Lone Moon added. It's best if it's the scale on your chest. Are you a demon? Little Biao's expression became even more bitter. He turned back into his original form, and with tears in his eyes, he reached out with his claws, gritted his teeth, and pulled out a heart-shaped scale from his chest. Will this do? Lone Moon glanced at the scale. Is this piece smaller than the one before? Why don't you? Young Emperor Lone Moon, you really can't pull it out anymore. Little Biao said word by word. If he continued, he would become a pink beast. All right. Lone Moon nodded reluctantly. He turned around and pushed Chef, saying, Open the door and send the scale over. Chef looked at him speechless. Then he raised his hand and opened a small realm gate on the table that led to little Biao's hand. In the next moment, a blood-red scale appeared on the table. Young Emperor Lone Moon, exalted goddess, remember to bring my scale back. There are 2 of them. Don't miss any. Little Biao reminded worriedly. All right, we got it. Don't worry, little Biao, it's all right. Lone Moon replied. Little Biao. You said the same thing the last time. Lone Moon, however, kept the jade token and cut off the video. Only then did he step forward and carefully examined the piece of scale on the table. This isn't any different. It was just cleaner than normal scales. It was clear that little Biao took good care of himself. I Ching also stepped forward and reached out to press on the scale. After sensing it carefully, his eyes suddenly widened. What is it? Lone Moon asked. What did you sense? Chef frowned and replied, Immortal Qi. Of course. Little Biao is a celestial emperor after all. This scale came from his real body. It would be strange if it didn't have immortal Qi. It's normal to have immortal Qi. Chef glanced at him and continued. But don't you think there's a little too much immortal Qi on it? What do you mean? Lone Moon frowned and picked up the scale on the table. He probed a bit of spirit Qi into it and was shocked. It's a little too much, but this immortal Qi can't last long. Shu Yi had already lost the heart-protecting scale for more than 3,000 years, not to mention the time difference between the immortal realm and the mortal realm. Unless the immortal Qi here has always been inside. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something and turned to Chef. Holy shit, it can't be. Chapter 648. Lone Moon conjured a seal and sent some immortal Qi into the scale. Indeed, in the next moment, a golden pattern appeared on the originally black scale. It was the pattern on the scale, but the shape looked very much like a natural array, a spirit gathering array. It really is. Lone Moon's eyes widened in disbelief. Could Scoop's original form be Hidden Spirit Beast? Chef answered. Damn. The so-called Hidden Spirit Beast was a legendary beast born in spirit veins. There were very few of them, and they only appeared near large spirit veins. That was why not many people had seen what they looked like. It was said that they did not need to specially cultivate. Their bodies would naturally absorb spirit Qi, and they could ascend directly when they grew up. No one knew the exact reason. From the looks of it now, it was because every scale on their bodies was a small spirit gathering array. They did not need to do anything at all to gather spirit Qi into their bodies. Even if the scale fell off, the spirit Qi inside was inexhaustible. What's more, Scoop was already a celestial emperor. Its scale would naturally convert the spirit Qi it absorbed into immortal Qi. In other words, the longer this scale was in the mortal realm, the more spirit Qi it absorbed. As long as one carried the scale with them, the immortal Qi could naturally be used. What was the difference between carrying this and carrying a spirit vein? No, carrying an immortal vein. No wonder Shu Yi's cultivation level rose so quickly. And it was normal for Zhuo Shuming to ascend so quickly in his previous life. What do we do with this scale? I Ching pointed at the heart-shaped scale in his hand. Things were already clear. Should he give Scoop back? Lone Moon took a look and narrowed his eyes. He said seriously, You've already pulled it out. How can we face Scoop if we don't use it? As he spoke, he sent a large amount of immortal Qi into it. He only stopped when he felt that it was about the same as the one in Shu Yi's hand. Just nice. Give it to $2, Zhuo. It was just a cheat. What's the big deal? He could make one for him anytime. It was definitely not because he thought his cultivation was too slow. Shening. I Ching. Scoop will cry. Can you make one? Lone Moon gave scale number 2 to $2, Zhuo. In order to prevent intruders from finding out, he hid the scale in his meridians. Even Zhuo Shuming himself did not know. Then he began to seriously teach him sword techniques. Although his aptitude was not very good, he was diligent and eager to learn. Lone Moon felt that after experiencing Fatty, who was an insulator to sword cultivators, his patience towards all sword cultivators had increased a lot. Especially towards Zhuo Shuming, a rare, active sword cultivator enthusiast. Moreover, to him, all he needed to do was to waste a little more time and beat him up a few more times. Especially after he found out that the intruder had stolen the gold finger, he was even less anxious. Estimating the time, Shu Yi was about to form her gold core. Indeed, 5 days later, on the right side of Guiyi Sek's Danshan Peak, thunderclouds suddenly filled the sky, thunder rumbled, and a hint of heaven and earth pressure seeped out from the clouds. Someone is about to form his gold core. Zhuo Shuming was shocked. He retracted his sword and looked at the clouds in shock. This is the lightning tribulation. He looked in that direction with some excitement and curiosity. After thinking for a while, He turned to look at the person beside him who was eating melon seeds. Brother Lone Moon. Go on. Lone Moon waved his hand nonchalantly. It was good for cultivators to be able to witness other people's tribulations. After all, the lightning tribulation carried the heaven and earth pressure, which helped to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Especially the lightning tribulation of core formation. It was the weakest among all the lightning tribulations. Its destructive power was not as great as other lightning tribulations. Remember not to get too close, he reminded. What is Brother Lone Moon talking about? Swashuming pulled him up. It's rare to see someone form a gold core. We naturally have to go together. With that said, he flew up on his sword and pulled him towards Danshan Peak. Lone Moon. Shit. He was so used to teaching disciples that he forgot that he was also a foundation establishment cultivator. The two of them had just flown up. Before they reached Danshan Peak, they saw many disciples from various peaks rushing over. It was obvious that they were also here to watch the tribulation. When they reached Danshan Peak, there were even more people. Densely packed seats filled the entire square. Danshan Peak disciples had the geographical advantage and were already seated in the front row. In front of the crowd stood a few nascent soul cultivators, especially the one right at the front. He was smiling until his eyes were align. He looked familiar and looked similar to Shu Yi. He should be Danshan Peak Lord Shu Yuan, Shu Yi's father. He seemed to feel that the person going through the tribulation was his daughter. His face was filled with joy. The few nascent soul cultivators at the side also congratulated him. He responded to them one by one. Even though he was happy, there was still some worry in his eyes. Yet he did not forget to turn back to instruct the disciples who came to watch. The lightning tribulation is dangerous. Those disciples who want to comprehend the heavenly Tao, just meditate this time. Do not leave the array casually. Shuming looked around. Only then did he realize that the center of the square had indeed been set up with a defensive array, protecting the people who came to watch the tribulation. He could not help but feel relieved. He turned and said, Brother Lone Moon, let's fight here. Brother Lone Moon. Brother Lone Moon. He turned and realized that the person who was just beside him had disappeared. He panicked and was about to look for her. Suddenly, a voice sounded beside his ear. I've already found a place to sit down. You don't have to care about me. He then relaxed. Probably because there were too many people just now. He did not mind and directly followed the surrounding disciples to sit cross-legged on the ground, waiting for the lightning tribulation to begin. Lone Moon only heaved a sigh of relief when he saw him sit down. There were too many people here. Shining and Chef also concealed themselves. Usually it would be fine if they followed beside him. Now that there were two empty seats behind him, it would be strange not to be exposed. So he decided to conceal himself as well. Together with Chef and Shining, they left the square. They turned and flew to a piece of empty land further ahead outside the array. The lightning tribulation in the sky was almost ready. Finally, a bolt of white lightning tore through the layers of dark clouds and fell down. It struck the person who was going through the tribulation below. The first lightning tribulation was the lightest. Shui obviously took it easily. Following that, the lightning tribulation became more and more concentrated and stronger. One after another, they came crashing down. Lone Moon casually glanced at her. After 60 bolts of lightning tribulation, Shu Yi's face was already beginning to pale. Some wounds also began to appear on her body. She looked to be in a difficult situation. And the further it went, the worse her condition became. Especially when the 80th bolt of lightning came down. She directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Even the golden core that she had just formed was showing signs of breaking. Will this invader not be unable to withstand it and be struck to death? Lone Moon could not help but ask. This was only the golden core lightning tribulation. This was too weak. Chapter 649. I don't think so. I Ching shook his head and looked at that person. He frowned. At least the other invader won't let her die. Huh. Lone Moon paused. The last bolt of lightning struck the person on the ground. Shui obviously had no strength to resist. Just as the tribulation lightning was about to hit her, a layer of strange green light suddenly flashed around her body, directly blocking the power of the tribulation lightning. Host, are you alright? The familiar broadcast sounded again. Lone Moon. I'm fine. Thank you 001. Shui replied. I didn't expect the so-called lightning tribulation in this world to be so powerful. The lightning tribulation is the most direct proof of the heavenly Tao. Of course it's powerful, but I can only temporarily slow down the time it takes for the lightning to hit you and deceive the heavenly Tao. But after that, the lightning will still fall on you. Shu Yi's expression darkened. After a while, she nodded and said, I understand. I will find an excuse to go into seclusion and prepare to take on the lightning tribulation. Host, you can do it. Congratulations on successfully forming your core. Hurry up and absorb spirit chi to heal your injuries. Shui climbed up and continued to sit properly. The three of them. So that's how it was. This 001 system exploited a loophole in time to infinitely extend the time it took for the lightning to strike. The heavenly Tao could not completely monitor time because to it backtracking, pausing or speeding up time was not normal. It would automatically adjust it. But the invader did not belong to this world. So they were not under its supervision. As long as they did not cause too much of an impact, it naturally would not find out. Lone Moon's expression darkened. It seemed like this system was very good at exploiting loopholes in the heavenly Tao. It seemed like it was not the first time it had done this in other planes. Shu Yi had just sat down when the surrounding spirit chi suddenly began to gather towards her, healing her injuries. The thunder clouds in the sky also dispersed. The surroundings became bright again. Faintly, there were some colorful clouds floating in the sky. They became brighter and brighter, as if they were condensing into some kind of image. Look up. One of the disciples suddenly exclaimed. Could it be that a phenomenon is going to appear? For a time, everyone, including the few nascent soul cultivators, raised their heads in unison and looked up at the sky with excitement. On the other hand, the faces of Shen Ying and the other two people darkened. Especially I Ching, who glared at the sky. What are you doing? The colorful clouds that were about to take shape in the sky suddenly froze. In the next moment, the nomological power above began to move around in a panic. Suddenly, there seemed to be a small voice that pitifully said, Don't you want it? Leader. Chef's voice deepened. Do your job properly. Why are you causing trouble? Sob, 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 sob. Yes, boss. No problem, boss. It saw that you had been staring at that person's tribulation for a long time. So it wanted to suck up to you and give you some avatars. Who knew that he had slapped the horse's leg? In the next moment, the rosy clouds in the sky turned black in an instant, and a burst of rain poured down, instantly drenching Shu Yi who was below. There was even a faint sour smell. Shu Yi, everyone, the trio, sigh. In this day and age, it was too difficult to be heavenly Tao. He couldn't guess the leader's thoughts at all. Little Yi. Shu Yuan, who had been watching this side anxiously, was the first to rush up. Seeing her drenched appearance, he was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted and asked with concern, Little Yi, are you all right? He also couldn't guess what that was in the sky just now. It clearly looked like an avatar, but in the next moment, there was another burst of rain, and it was acid rain. But she was his daughter after all. So he didn't think too much about it, and directly conjured a dirt removal spell for her. Shu Yi, who was stunned by the sudden burst of rain, finally reacted. Thank you, Daddy. I'm fine. Shu Yuan nodded in satisfaction. Let's go and meet your uncle masters. They were also outside just now to protect you. Yes, Daddy. She smiled obediently and then followed Shu Yuan forward, but at the same time, she called out to the system in her heart. 001. What's with that rain just now? Why is there still rain after the lightning tribulation? I don't know either. Maybe when I attacked just now, the heavenly Tao sensed something. Then what should we do? Shu Yi's face paled. The heavenly Tao should only be suspicious. It looks like you have to quickly endure the last lightning tribulation. Shu Yi gritted her teeth, her heart filled with frustration. She kept feeling that ever since she came to this world, everything she did was not going smoothly. What about the resentment points? She thought of something and asked directly, did the original owner's resentment points decrease? Let me check. The original owner's resentment points did not change. It will probably only decrease after she sees Zhuo Shuming. Shui frowned. Then where is he? Is he here? Discovered target, 50 meters ahead. She turned to look, and indeed in the crowd, she saw Zhuo Shuming sitting on the ground. Now that the lightning tribulation had ended, most of the disciples had already left. Only he was still sitting in the middle, looking up at the sky thoughtfully. Xu Yi's heart leaped with joy. She hurriedly greeted the uncle masters who were congratulating her, as well as the other disciples she was familiar with. Then she exclaimed in surprise, Junior brother Zhuo is here too. With that said, she walked directly towards Zhuo Shuming, ready to harvest the resentment points. She stood in front of Zhuo Shuming and deliberately raised her head slightly, smiling. Junior brother Zhuo. No, I should call you disciple nephew Zhuo now. Zhuo Shuming faltered, then looked towards Xu Yi, his expression still somewhat confused. Disciple nephew? Senior sister Xu? Xu Yi's smile deepened, but there was a coldness in her eyes. Did you see that original owner? As long as you are strong enough, even those whom you could only look up to in the past could only look up to you. Ding! Original owner's resentment points decreased by 10. It really worked. Xu Yi heaved a sigh of relief, finally feeling a sense of relief. She then added, You should call me Uncle Master Xu. The sect's rule is that those above Golden Core should be addressed as Uncle Master. Uncle Master Xu? Zhuo Shuming frowned. Suddenly, as if recalling something, his eyes widened. I understand. It's good that you understand. Don't forget in the future. Before she could finish speaking, a huge burst of spirit qi suddenly erupted from Zhuo Shuming's body. Even the surrounding spirit qi began to gather towards him. Xu Yi lost her footing and was almost swept away by the violent spirit qi around her. Little Yi. Fortunately, Xu Yuan, who was beside her, helped her up. Xu Yi looked at Zhuo Shuming with a confused expression. He's having an epiphany. Xu Yuan took one look and immediately reacted, also shocked. Turning around, he pulled Xu Yi back and said to the people around him, Everyone hurry and retreat. Don't affect this disciple's epiphany. Epiphany. Xu Yi's face paled, her eyes widened in disbelief. How could this be? How did he suddenly have an epiphany? Before she had time to be shocked, she suddenly heard a series of familiar mechanical sounds. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 5. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 10. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 20. The group of 3 not far away. System. Xu Yi. What the hell? For all, Ngun Guo. Speaking of which. The corner of Longman's mouth twitched. He looked at Zhuo Shuming, who was already surrounded by spirit qi. Why do I feel that Zhuo Shuming alone is enough to deal with this invader? Zhuo Shuming's actions were simply poisonous, the kind that specifically poisoned Xu Yi. He suddenly had the urge to light a candle for the intruder. What was going on? Chapter 650. Zhuo Shuming's epiphany did not last long. He woke up in the afternoon. His cultivation also jumped from the early stage of foundation establishment to the late stage. Perhaps because there were too few disciples who could achieve epiphany. Although his cultivation was low, he still attracted the attention of the various peak masters of Guiyi sect. They looked at him with more and more satisfaction. Zhuo Shuming was excited too. He immediately turned to look for Lone Moon, wanting to share this joy. In the end, he did not find him. Apart from the nascent soul elders who helped to protect him on a whim, the square was empty. Even the disciples who were watching the tribulation had all left, including Lone Moon. Epiphany was not like tribulation. Others would not benefit from it. Naturally, they would not stay to watch. Zhuo Shuming. What happened to being friends? However, he did not pay too much attention to it. He solemnly thanked the elder who had helped to protect him, and then went straight to Lone Moon's courtyard with a look of joy on his face. From afar, he saw Lone Moon sitting in front of the table, holding a bowl of rice in his hand, and eating like a whirlwind. Brother Lone Moon? Zhuo Shuming was stunned. He looked at the table suspiciously. You haven't achieved grain liberation? Why, you have a problem. Lone Moon looked up, then turned and continued to snatch food. Shit. The divine meat was all gone. Don't think that others can't see you. you're snatching so fiercely. He just can't see you, he's not blind. No. No problem. Swashuming was stunned. He was just surprised that Brother Lone Moon was already a Foundation establishment cultivator, yet he had not achieved grain liberation. Wait, didn't the food on the table disappear too quickly? Let's go, we'll talk outside. Lone Moon quickly finished the meat in the bowl, dragged Swashuming out, closing the door behind him. When they walked into the courtyard, he scanned Swashuming up and down, frowned, saying with disdain, "You're now a Foundation establishment cultivator? What happened to the epiphany? Did it go to waste?" "I'm already in the late stage of Foundation establishment." Swashuming thought he was happy for him. He immediately said excitedly, "I didn't expect it to be so fast." Hee fast. Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Look at Chef. His epiphany is a leap of 1 or 2 major realms. Why did you jump a small realm? So your epiphany is also worth 2 yuan. Isn't it fast? Swashuming faltered. Sect Master already said it would be soon. Why was Brother Lone Moon looking at him with even more disdain? Forget it. Lone Moon sighed and said, "Since you're already in the late stage of Foundation establishment, you can start practicing the second stage of that sword technique from before." Of course. He nodded. A moment later, he seemed to think of something. His brows furrowed, and he hesitated. "It's just that this epiphany For a moment he didn't know what to say. "What's the matter?" Lone Moon asked. "What happened to you again?" Swashuming looked around warily and suddenly gritted his teeth. "Let's talk inside." With that said, he pulled Lone Moon back into the house and closed the door warily. Then with a conflicted expression he said, "Brother Lone Moon, this time why are the dishes on the table gone?" Not just the dishes, even the plates had disappeared. He remembered that Brother Lone Moon didn't clean them up just now. Lone Moon, who was pulled inside, stiffened. He turned to glare at a certain foodie who had eaten and drank to her heart's content, and was waiting for Chef to serve pastries. He immediately sent a voice transmission. "Hurry up and go in to eat, you're going to lose your disguise." "So troublesome." Shening laid on the table without moving. "Troublesome my ass." Lone Moon's face turned green. "Chef, hurry up and take her away." I Ching faltered. He glanced at the pastries in his hands that he hadn't put down in time, and kept them. "Master, I'll bring you in to eat." With that said, he bent down and carried the pile of mud on the side of the table, and turned to enter the house. "I set up an array on the table." Lone Moon then replied, $2 swa. "It will clean up automatically." Brother Lone Moon knows array formations. Swashuming was shocked, his eyes filled with surprise. "Nonsense. Is there anything I don't know?" Lone Moon then sat down at the table. "What were you trying to tell me just now?" His expression changed instantly, and he frowned again. He then turned to sit on the chair beside him and asked, "Actually, I don't know what's going on either. I keep feeling that my epiphany just now was strange." "Huh." Lone Moon faltered. "What's strange?" "I can't say either." He looked even more confused. "Previously when I saw Senior Sister Shu. No, now when Uncle Master Shu was going through the tribulation. I don't know why, but I kept feeling like I had seen her before, but I couldn't remember what it was." Lone Moon was shocked and turned to look at him. Later, Uncle Master Shu suddenly came over and told me that she had already ascended to the Golden Core stage. My mind suddenly thought of the method of channeling spirit chi for core formation. His frown deepened. Then, I realized that I had an epiphany. Although I've seen the method of core formation in all kinds of cultivation manuals before. But what floated in my mind before was different. It was like, he didn't seem to know how to explain. His frown deepened. After a while he said hesitantly, "It was like, I had formed my core before." "Formed your core before?" Lone Moon tightened the fan in his hand. "Tell me in detail, why did you have such an idea? Did you see something?" "I didn't." He shook his head and said, "It was just a feeling. I could even think of how to block every bolt of lightning." "Have you told this to anyone else?" "Of course not," he said in a low voice. "How could I mention such a strange thing to anyone else? I can only tell you. Brother Lone Moon, tell me, is there something wrong with me?" He looked confused. "I'm still a Foundation establishment cultivator. How could I know so much about core formation?" It's like I've experienced it before. No, you've really experienced it before. Do you think I? He suddenly thought of something. His eyes widened and he stood up. What? Lone Moon was shocked. It can't be. You really guessed it? Zhou Shuming suddenly sat closer. He lowered his voice and said nervously, Don't tell me. I've been infected by senior sister Shu. Is there something wrong with my brain too? Lone Moon. Shining. I Ching. Infected my ass. For all. Ngunguo, don't you freaking make Shui feel uncomfortable all over? I've never met a partner who's so cooperative. Indeed, they're unnecessary, right? $2 alone can definitely turn the whole place upside down. Brother Lone Moon, didn't you tell me the last time that mental retardation is contagious? Zhou Shuming analyzed seriously. I think that senior sister Shui, no, Uncle Master Shui must have the so-called mental retardation that you're talking about. Hasn't she been coming to our courtyard recently? It was only after she spoke to me that I had an epiphany, so I must have been infected by her. The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. He even asked, Brother Lone Moon, what do you think? Chapter 651. I say $2 Zhua. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He took a deep breath and patted his shoulder. Let me give you a piece of advice. You'd better not see Shui in the future? You think so too? His expression brightened. No. Lone Moon cut him off. I think she'll beat you to death the moment you open your mouth. What did he mean? Then am I sick or not? Don't worry. Lone Moon sighed and said, With your intelligence, do you think there's any room for you to be infected with an advanced disease like mental retardation? None of you are mentally retarded. He was the one who thought that $2 Zhua could sense that he was being rewound earlier. Although he didn't understand what he meant, he suddenly felt like he was stabbed by a knife. Alright, just focus on your cultivation. Why are you thinking so much? Lone Moon rolled his eyes. Am I really fine? He looked at her blankly. You're fine. You're so healthy that you look like you're black. You don't look like you're in trouble. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He thought for a moment and casually said, You only had an epiphany after looking at other people's tribulations. Maybe you only saw a sliver of heaven's secret. That's why you feel like you've formed a core before. This is your opportunity. This is heaven's secret. Zhou Shuming was shocked. The worry on his face disappeared instantly. He seemed to have thought of something. Then why don't I? Alright, you can scram now. Go practice your sword tomorrow morning. Lone Moon didn't want to listen to him anymore. He directly pulled him open the door and kicked him out. Don't come to my place at night again. It was fine if he was eating. What if he was angry when he woke up? But he still wanted to say something. Scram. Lone Moon slammed the door shut. Zhou Shuming. He had wanted to tell Lone Moon about heaven's secret in detail. He wanted to see if he could help him have an epiphany too. Could it be that he had a bad temper because he didn't have enough to eat? Zhou Shuming touched his nose and went back into the house. Lone Moon only raised his hand to set up a few isolation arrays when he sensed that the other party had left. He turned and walked into the house. He looked at the two people who had heard the whole thing and snatched a piece of cake from them. What do you think about $2 Zhua's epiphany? He must have sensed something from his past life, I Ching guessed. But time has already turned back. How can he still remember? Lone Moon did not understand. When Chef rewound, there was no such phenomenon. It was only after he fully awakened his assistant's abilities that he regained his memories. Could it be that the system rewinding time is different from the manager's active adjustment? Could it be that there are repercussions? That should be impossible. I Ching shook his head. It could actually pull Zhou Shuming down to the lower realm. This proves that time has really reversed completely. There would not be a loophole like him remembering his past life. Then why do you have an impression of your past life? Both of them frowned. Maybe that's not his impression? Shunning suddenly said. Didn't he just say that it's about the feeling of a golden core? Lone Moon blurted out. Things like core formation, if it's not his own. Holy shit. He suddenly thought of something and subconsciously turned to look at Chef beside him. It can't be that stupid heavenly Tao of yours, right? I Ching. What the hell is stupid? But thinking about it, it made sense. The heavenly Tao does not have sentience, but it will still correct itself when it encounters problems. The three of us have all come down to the lower realm. It's normal that the heavenly Tao can sense that something is wrong. I Ching nodded. All right. So the excuse that he casually used to trick 2 bucks was true. In a sense, this was really a heavenly secret. This heavenly Tao is finally sensible for once. No matter what. Such an epiphany was still beneficial to 2 bucks, Zhua whose cultivation was as slow as a tortoise. Zhua Shuming's cultivation jumped to the late stage of foundation establishment. He was even more enthusiastic about practicing the mist sword technique. Under Loman's guidance, he successfully comprehended the second level of the sword technique. His set of sword technique was divided into 10 levels. Although Zhua Shuming did not know which extremity this set of sword technique belonged to among heaven, earth, mystic, and yellow, he vaguely sensed that he would only be able to completely master the entire set of sword technique after he reached the nascent soul stage. But he did not know why. His cultivation was clearly much higher. But every time he practiced, he would still be beaten black and blue by Lone Moon whose cultivation was much lower than his. And compared to when he had not comprehended the second level, he seemed to be beaten even harder. He even glorified it by saying, "True skills can only come from practice. Sword cultivators are trained by fighting." He suddenly had some doubts. Was Lone Moon really just a foundation establishment cultivator? He heard that sword cultivators could always challenge those of a higher level. But Lone Moon only challenged him. The key was that he did not even have the strength to fight back. He could not even last one move. It must be because he was too weak. He did not learn the sword technique well. Sword cultivators were indeed broad and profound. He could not help but be motivated. He practiced even more seriously. He was just short of practicing for a full 24 hours a day. Old Father Lone Moon expressed that apart from being a little slow, he was quite satisfied. Just as he was thinking of ways to make him run faster, a person suddenly came to the main peak. He was wearing a disciple uniform that was completely different from theirs. His sleeves were even embroidered with the unique patterns of each peak. "Sect Master wants to see us?" Zhua Shuming was stunned. He put away the sword in his hand and looked at Lone Moon blankly. "I wonder what's the matter." "I don't know about that." The person shook his head. He looked at them and smiled kindly. "Maybe it's something good? Junior brothers, why don't you quickly follow me to the main hall?" Zhua Shuming subconsciously looked at Lone Moon. Seeing him nod, he then replied, "Thank you, senior brother." The person then turned and led the two of them towards the main hall of the main peak. The moment they entered, Lone Moon felt a cold gaze sweep over them. It landed on Zhua Shuming who was in front. Lone Moon looked over. It was indeed that invader Shu Yi. She seemed to have recalled something. She looked at Zhua Shuming with a gaze so sharp that knives almost flew out. But she looked different from when she formed her core. Her spirit chi was more condensed. But there was something else about her body. It was just that it was so shallow that it could not be found. "It's demonic chi," I Ching suddenly transmitted. A few days ago, she should have come into contact with a fiendish cultivator. Or someone who became a demon. That's why she was infected with the aura of demonic chi. Lone Moon's expression darkened. His brows instantly furrowed. Fiendish cultivator? This invader's business was quite extensive. He hadn't seen her for half a month. He thought she had gone to find a place to receive the last lightning tribulation. He didn't expect that she still had time to come into contact with a fiendish cultivator. He didn't know what she was up to. It seemed like he had to keep a closer eye on Zhua Shuming. Chapter 652. The hall was filled with people. The various peak masters and elders were all present. They even brought their disciples with them. Guiyi Sect's sect master Yuan sat on the main seat, smiling at the two people who entered. Other than Shu Yi who looked unfriendly, the other nascent soul elders had the same expression. They even had a hint of admiration. Of course these were all directed at Zhua Shuming. The two of them bowed politely. Yuan then explained to everyone, "I called all junior brothers here today mainly to inform all of you. I think these two disciples are not bad. I want to officially take them in as disciples. What do you think?" The moment he said that, all the elders had expected expressions, as if they had already guessed Yuan's intentions. On the other hand, Shu Yi's face darkened. I said so too. An elder smiled and said, our Guei sect has never seen a disciple with an epiphany in so long. We also want to take them in as disciples. I didn't expect senior brother to act so quickly. If junior brothers have no objections, then I will accept these 2 disciples. Yulwan's smile deepened. He then looked at the 2 people in the middle and said, you should be called Lone Moon? From today onwards, you will be the 13th disciple under my sect. Lone Moon stiffened. He really didn't expect that the other party called them here to take in disciples. To be honest, he really didn't want to acknowledge a master. Not only was it inconvenient for him to move around, he didn't know as much as him. He wanted to find an excuse to reject. As for Zhuo Shuming, Yulwan turned to look at Zhuo Shuming. The satisfaction in his eyes deepened. From today onwards, you will be my personal disciple. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. They didn't expect that he would directly take him in as a personal disciple. They didn't expect senior brother sect master to think so highly of this person. How can this be? Shu Yi was shocked and directly blurted out. How could he be a personal disciple? One must know that there was a difference between an ordinary disciple and a personal disciple. There was usually only one personal disciple, and they would leave a personal imprint in the other party's divine perception that could not be casually removed. They would also teach everything to their personal disciples without holding anything back. Shu Yi panicked. Yulwan was the sect master of Guei sect. If Zhuo Shuming became his personal disciple, wouldn't he get whatever he wanted? In that case, wouldn't his treatment be even better than when he was at Danxia Mountain in his previous life? One must know that although he received Supremacy Tianyi's guidance in his previous life, he was only taken in as Supremacy Tianyi's disciple after he formed his core. Furthermore, he was only one of his many disciples. Sect Master, how could you accept him as your direct disciple? She immediately stood up. Why? Yulwan paused and asked subconsciously. Little E. Shu Yuan frowned and reprimanded Shu Yi angrily. Don't be rude. He was about to pull her back. Shu Yi came back to his senses. His eyes darted around before he said, how can the direct disciple of the sect master be so casual? I don't think there's anything special about this disciple. Furthermore, he's only a foundation establishment disciple with 3 spirit veins. She took a deep breath and said with a worried expression, besides, you're the sect master of my sect. Your personal disciple concerns the future of our sect. I see that many Golden Core senior brothers haven't even had the opportunity to become your disciple. Sect master must be careful. When everyone heard that, they felt that it made sense. He was indeed the sect master's direct disciple. If there were no accidents, he might be the next sect master. Indeed, they had to choose carefully. I feel that this disciple is very suitable. Yulwan's smile deepened, but he had no intention of changing his mind. Everyone, you might not know, but I've been paying attention to this child for a long time. Although he has 3 spirit veins and looks ordinary, that's not the case. It hasn't even been a year since he entered my Guei sect, and he's already cultivated from Qi Refinement Level 7 to late-stage foundation establishment. I think even a celestial spirit root wouldn't be as fast. A hint of surprise flashed across everyone's eyes. This speed was indeed a prodigy. He had an epiphany just by looking at a tribulation experience. This proves that his comprehension is not something ordinary people can achieve. Furthermore, when he was still in the outer sect, he managed to grow a mutated spirit plant on an abandoned spirit field. That mutated spirit herb was planted by him. Everyone was shocked. An elder even stood up directly. That's right. Yuan nodded. Although those spirit herbs appeared because of the living meridian. But if there wasn't this opportunity, how could it be him? Every immortal cultivator is doing things that go against the heavens. And this child, he doesn't lack any talent, comprehension or opportunity. After he voluntarily handed over all the mutated spirit herbs, he never made any requests. After his epiphany, he was neither arrogant nor rash. These days, he has been cultivating diligently. It shows that his temperament is exceptional. Everyone was even more surprised. Their gazes towards Zhuo Shuming were filled with admiration. Such a disciple is indeed not bad. That's right. There are fewer and fewer people as outstanding as him now. No wonder sect master is in a hurry to take him in as a direct disciple. Everything else is secondary. Even Xu Yuan couldn't help but praise him. Just this temperament alone is something that others can't achieve. Senior brother sect master has good taste. Seeing that Zhuo Shuming becoming a direct disciple was about to be confirmed, Xu Yi was even more anxious. But sect master, little E. Xu Yuan interrupted his daughter and glanced at her. Don't make a fuss. Sect master knows what he's doing. In terms of temperament, even you can't compare to him. What? Xu Yi's eyes widened in disbelief. But she heard a voice that made her even angrier. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 10. Warning! When resentment reaches 100, the mission will automatically fail. Damn it! Why did the resentment points increase again? Xu Yi was so angry that her liver was hurting. She even started to speak incoherently. Who said I can't compare to him? She was clearly already a core formation cultivator. Her cultivation had always been above his. Xu Yuan's brows furrowed. He was displeased with his daughter's strange temper. He was about to reprimand her when a cold male voice suddenly sounded in the hall. Who said my little E can't compare to others? In the next moment, everyone felt a strong gust of wind rushing into the hall. It also brought with it an irresistible suppressive force. A black figure appeared in the hall instantly. His entire body was filled with cold air. He scanned the people in the hall with dissatisfaction. Everyone was shocked. They instantly recognized the person. Everyone, including the sect master, stood up and bowed with cupped fists. Greetings, Uncle Master Tianji. The person who came was another soul formation supremacy of Gui sect. Lone Moon raised his brows. Yo, the person who had turned into a demon was here. But for some reason, the demonic qi on his body was all suppressed in his dantian. It was as if it was locked by something. Chef, what's going on? Lone Moon turned to look at I Ching. There's an energy in his dantian that doesn't belong to this plane. It's suppressing the demonic qi and preventing him from completely turning into a demon. I Ching said. So that was it. Seeing how he was standing up for Xu Yi, it seemed like it was that system's doing again. Chapter 653. Indeed, once she saw him, Xu Yi was instantly overjoyed. Like a little girl, she skipped over and called out coquettishly, Master! Everyone was shocked and turned to look at Xu Yuan, only to see that his face was already as black as the bottom of a pot. Clearly, he was completely unaware that his daughter had become the disciple of someone else. Tianji's gaze warmed and he responded. In an instant, he swept an even colder look at everyone. Who was the one who said that my personal disciple can't compare to others? Personal disciple. Supremacy Tianji actually accepted Xu Yi as his personal disciple. Everyone was shocked again. They looked at Xu Yuan with sympathy in their eyes. It was one thing for his daughter to become the disciple of someone else, but it was a personal disciple. Wasn't this a slap to his face, and saying that he did not teach well? I want to see who can compare to my disciple. Tianji did not care about all this. His gaze swept across everyone, even carrying the suppressive force of a soul formation cultivator, finally landing on Zhuo Shuming. It's you. Zhuo Shuming felt a huge suppressive force land on him. His heart churned, and he lost his balance and took a step back. He opened his mouth and spat out blood. Lone Moon's expression darkened. He reached out to support him, and secretly used his spirit energy to protect his heart meridians. Uncle Master Tianji. The sect master was also shocked, as if he did not expect that he would directly attack a mere foundation establishment disciple. He hurriedly called out to stop him. Tianji then retracted his suppressive force, and turned to glance at Yuan. You intend to accept such a disciple as your personal disciple? Uncle Master Yuan wanted to explain. He can't even withstand half of my suppressive force. To think you like him. Yuan, you're really getting more and more muddle-headed. Tianji interrupted him directly, and turned to look at everyone. I came today to tell you that I think Xu Yi is not bad. I've already accepted her as my personal disciple yesterday. I don't want to interfere in the sex matters, but... He glanced at Zhou Shuming and said, the future of Guiyi sect cannot be so carelessly handed over to such a person. Everyone looked embarrassed. They had just praised Zhou Shuming, and now they were slapped in the face by Tianji. Moreover, Tianji was a senior and a soul formation cultivator. They could not refute him. It seemed like Yuan would not be able to accept this personal disciple today. Yuan flushed with anger, turning to look at Zhou Shuming with guilt and pity. Naturally, Zhou Shuming could tell that this supremacy Tianji was purposely targeting him to stand up for Shu Yi. He didn't feel disappointed or regretful. He hadn't planned on taking sect master in the first place, so he took the initiative to speak first. Thank you for your kind intentions, sect master. But disciple is not talented. In the past, when I cultivated, I didn't choose pill cultivation but chose the sword Dao. I'm afraid I can't become sect master's disciple. Please forgive me, sect master. You're a sword cultivator. Yuan was shocked. He didn't expect that. Yes, Zhou Shuming replied, feeling Lone Moon nudge him. He instantly understood and added, junior brother Lone Moon and I are both sword cultivators. Yuan took a closer look. Indeed, he saw a sliver of sword chi on the two of them. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. But this saved him the trouble. Instantly he relaxed. My Danlin mountain is full of pill cultivators. You're indeed not suitable to enter the sect. I wonder. He was just about to let him choose which mountain he wanted to go to. He would take the opportunity to do him a favor and give him a few cultivation techniques. Supremacy Tianji at the side suddenly snorted coldly. Humph. So you're a sword cultivator. Cultivating the sword in my Guiyi sect. You're really stupid to the extreme. His eyes were full of contempt. Forget it. Given your qualifications with 3 spirit roots, I guess you can only become a useless sword cultivator. Zhou Shuming's expression changed. Lone Moon's expression darkened. He felt a surge of anger surging up from his chest. He was about to explode. Holy shit. What the F***CK? What's wrong with us sword cultivators? Did we sword cultivators offend you? You're a trash soul formation core cultivator. What right do you have to look down on us sword cultivators? For all, calm down, Father Niu. Shenning hurriedly grabbed hold of the person who was about to rush out. Let go of me. I'm a sword cultivator. I'm going to beat him to death. Lone Moon felt terrible all over. Where did this trash pill cultivator come from? We sword cultivators have never suffered losses in anything other than body cultivators. If you have the guts, fight me one-on-one. You can't fight now. The intruder was still here. They would be exposed. Lone Moon turned back and glared at her. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He turned and sent a voice transmission. All right, I won't fight. Chef, you go. Go out and blink his dog eyes. I Ching faltered. Blink. Go out and show off. Let this trash pill cultivator see what a real sword cultivator is. He could talk about $2 swa, but definitely not about sword cultivators. I Ching was speechless. How deep was Father Niu's obsession with sword cultivators? He could only look at his master. Shenning nodded repeatedly. Let's go. We can't afford to offend a mad Father Niu. Only then did the two of them fly out. On the other side, Tianji seemed to have had enough of being cocky. He thought that he had won back the situation for Shu Yi. He then looked at Shu Yi and said, all right, let's stop here for today. Little ear, follow me back. Shu Yi smiled. She looked at Zhou Shuming, whose face had darkened. Her heart instantly felt carefree. Fortunately, she listened to the system yesterday and came out of seclusion early. She saved this supremacy who was about to turn into a demon. She picked up a good and helpful master for free. Indeed, in the next moment, a voice that made her even happier sounded. Ding! Original owner's resentment points reduced by 10. So she hurriedly replied, yes, master. Wait. Little E. Shu Yuan, who had been stunned for a long time, finally snapped back to his senses. He looked at his daughter with a complicated expression. Although he knew that his daughter was a little stubborn, he did not expect her to suddenly change her master. He wanted to go back and ask her about it. Tianji's expression turned cold. Shu Yuan, Little E has already acknowledged me as her master. She will naturally stay with me in Chi Tian Pavilion from now on. But Xu Yuan still wanted to say something. But Tianji did not have the patience to explain anything. He directly pulled her and turned to walk out. Uncle Master Tianji. Xu Yuan panicked. He immediately chased after them. Just as he reached the door, a huge wave of sword chi suddenly came down from the sky. Xu Yuan could not hold on. He lost his balance and fell to the ground with a thud. Even Tianji, who was in the soul formation stage, was directly forced to kneel on the ground. He had to support himself with both hands to prevent himself from falling. Not to mention Xu Yi, who was beside him. She directly vomited blood. If not for the system, her golden core would have been shattered. Gui Sek's protective mountain array was immediately activated. A transparent layer of protection appeared in the entire sky. But immediately after, there was a loud clang. That protective mountain array was like a soap bubble that would burst with one poke. It directly burst. This is sword chi. The expressions of the elders who came out immediately changed. They immediately conjured a seal and set up an array. Quick, put up the defensive array. Chapter 654. The few of them moved at the same time. A layer of golden protective shield shielded the few of them inside, and then pulled the three people who were on the ground back into the defensive array. The few of them then looked a little better. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the sky in horror. Only then did they realize that the sky above was filled with spirit swords, densely covering the entire sky. Every sword carried chilling sword chi, as if it could fall at any time. They could faintly see that in the middle, someone was riding a sword in the air. Yu Wan's face paled instantly. He was extremely nervous. This was a sword cultivator. And a sword cultivator that could directly restrain a soul formation cultivator. Then the other party was also a soul formation cultivator. But why did he suddenly attack them? So he could only bite the bullet and shout. May I ask which expert has come to our Gui sect? Lone Moon also looked at Chef, who had summoned the sword array in the air. His mouth twitched, and he directly scolded them via voice transmission. What are you two doing? I asked you to act cool, not to exterminate the sect. Can't they have some acting skills like when they tricked him? Chef stiffened. Used to it. He was familiar with fighting. Acting cool was obviously Father Nio's business scope. It was a different line of work. So, he changed his hand seal. Instantly the spirit swords in the sky began to gather, forming 8 huge white sword spirits. They flew in 8 different directions, and then with a few rumbles, landed around Gui sect. They formed a huge array. Instantly, a layer of white light flashed, covering the entire Gui sect. In the next moment, it slowly disappeared, along with the 8 huge swords. If he accidentally destroyed a protective mountain array, he would return another one to them. The people below who were on guard were stunned. What was going on? Just now, they looked like they were here to cause trouble. Not only did they retract their sword chi, it seemed like the other party also set up an even more powerful protective mountain array for them. Everyone was confused, but seeing that the other party did not seem to have any intention of attacking, they could not help but heave a sigh of relief. They all looked up curiously into the sky. After a while, they saw a man riding a sword down, dressed in blue robes, his body exuding faint sword chi, surrounded by spirit chi. He was already in the late stage of soul formation. His handsome and cold face had a kind of look of wealth. Why did you transform into Boss Lan's appearance? The corner of Loman's mouth twitched. He was shocked. He thought that Boss Lan had brought Radish down to the lower realm. Master asked me to change my appearance. I couldn't think of anything else, so I changed into a familiar one. Chef sent a voice transmission. Wasn't he afraid that the intruder would recognize him? If you're familiar, why didn't you choose Fatty? Why did you choose Boss Lan? Fatty is too short. He doesn't look like one. I Ching said matter-of-factly. Only a fool would believe you. You're just saying that I'm fat, right? Greetings, Venerable One. Yu Wan went forward nervously, cupping his fists and bowing respectfully. Please forgive us for digging our eyes. May I know which sect's supremacy is from? Rogue Cultivator. Rogue Cultivator. Yu Wan was even more shocked. When did such a sword cultivator expert appear among the itinerant cultivators? Then why has supremacy come to your sect? I'm fine. I Ching replied subconsciously. Yulwan was speechless. Why did you scare people for no reason? Chef, find a reason to stay. Lone Moon directly sent a voice transmission. There was a ready-made opportunity. Don't think about slacking off. There's a small matter. I Ching changed the topic and turned to look at Zhuo Shuming. Zhuo Shuming had yet to recover from that shocking sword chi. He looked at Chef with a gaze full of shock, excitement, yearning and disbelief. So this was a sword cultivator. He did not make the wrong choice. So sword cultivators could be so strong that they could suppress swordsmen of the same level, with just sword chi. I wonder what important matter supremacy has. Is there anything my Gui sect can help with? Yulwan asked even more respectfully. A soul formation sword cultivator was comparable to a traveling immortal. No sect would easily offend such a cultivator. Instead, they would try their best to befriend him. What's more, the other party was a late-stage soul formation cultivator. Chef stiffened. It was so hard to come up with an excuse. He wasn't Father Nyo. What should he do? Making up stories was the most annoying. He thought about it and decided to use a ready-made one. Aya! His face stiffened. He suddenly let out a very exaggerated and fake exclamation. He pointed at Zhuo Shuming, who was still in a daze. Isn't this fellow Taoist Zhuo who lent me 2 spirit stones for teleportation? Long time no see. Do you have the money to return it now? Yulwan. Everyone. What the hell? Chasing all the way here for 2 spirit stones? Are you King kidding me? Winky face Lone Moon. This was definitely not a child he had brought up. Was it too late to sever ties now? Ah, is there such a thing? Zhuo Shuming actually took out 4 spirit stones and handed them over. Thank you, fellow Taoist. You're welcome. Wait a minute. Why did this scene feel so familiar? Zhuo Shuming's hand stiffened. He could not help but ask, may I know supremacy's Tao name? I Ching. Again. Zhuo Shuming felt the corner of his mouth twitch. He subconsciously looked around. He then found a familiar figure behind I Ching, who was nibbling on a fruit. Hey, 2 pieces. Shening waved a hand in greeting. It's really him. He could not help but turn to look at the person beside him. Brother Lone Moon, is this the tradition of asking him for travel expenses the moment you appear? Lone Moon silently turned his head away. Don't ask me. I don't know them. This fellow Taoist. I Ching turned to look at Lone Moon. He continued to make up his excuse with a straight face. Didn't that person borrow? You dare to say that I owe you money? Before he could finish, Lone Moon directly retorted with a voice transmission. I Ching stiffened. He subconsciously covered his bag of ingredients. The words that came out of his mouth changed abruptly. That fellow Taoist Lone Moon who lent me a lot of spirit stones? Alright, he really could not remember how much living expenses Father Nyo had given him. Supremacy I Ching, long time no see. Lone Moon suppressed the irritation in his heart. He then smiled and continued the messy words that the other person made up. He turned to look at Gui Sect Master Yulwan. Reporting to Sect Master. Before I joined Gui Sect, I was fortunate enough to meet Supremacy I Ching. He did not bring any spirit stones with him at that time. So I did Supremacy a small favor. I did not think that I would have the chance to meet Supremacy again. With that said, he turned to look at Zhuo Shuming. So Brother Zhuo was acquainted with Supremacy before you joined the sect? Zhuo Shuming faltered. He subconsciously nodded. Yes. Then we are really fated. He smiled. Supremacy is really a good person who knows how to repay favors. So you've always remembered the 10,000 superior grade spirit stones I lent you. You specially chased me to Gui Sect to return it. He specially adjusted the number of 10,000 and directly reached out his hand. You don't even know how to act cool. What's the use of supporting you? Hand over your living expenses. I Ching. Shening. Beast. Not even letting go of living expenses. Chapter 655. I see. Only then did Yulwan react. So this Supremacy was here to return the favor. He instantly heaved a sigh of relief. His gaze shifted and he immediately smiled amicably. Supremacy is really too courteous. It's just 10,000 superior grade spirit stones. Why don't we, Gui sect, make the decision and give this disciple 10,000 spirit stones? Just take it as a token of our gratitude to the Venerable One for rearranging the mountain guarding formation. I Ching. Shining. Lone Moon. There was such a thing. For all, the trio's eyes lit up. Without having to deduct their living expenses, Chef instantly felt that he had come up with a smooth excuse. He said directly, Sect Master, you don't have to be so polite. I set up the array because I saw that your sect's scenery is not bad. It's a good place. That's why I prepared in advance. Venerable One, you mean? Yulwan was taken aback, unable to understand his intentions. Does your sect lack sword cultivators? I'm like this. Yulwan. The Peak Masters. All the elders. Were they hallucinating just now? Oh my god. A soul formation cultivator had fallen from the sky, the kind that delivered themselves to their doorstep. Yulwan suddenly wanted to pinch himself to see if he was dreaming. One had to know that soul formation supremacies were the highest level of cultivators. One more step, and they would be able to ascend. Which sect didn't treat them like their ancestors? Furthermore, the number of soul formation cultivators directly affected the strength of the sect. Gui sect was at a disadvantage. They only had 2 soul formation supremacies, although the other sects didn't dare to offend them, because they were all pill cultivators. They didn't dare to rashly offend them. However, in terms of raw strength, they were indeed inferior to the other first-rate immortal sections. It was fine on the surface, but he had suffered quite a bit in the dark. Moreover, there were demonic cultivators eyeing them covetously. If they really fought, Gui sect would not be able to resist at all. Even the mountain-protecting formation required them to spend spirit stones to invite sects that specialized in formations to reinforce it once every 10 years. Gui sect's biggest shortcoming was having too few powerful cultivators, especially soul formation cultivators. This was also the reason why they had always been inferior to Tai Yin sect. After all, Tai Yin sect had more than 10 soul formation supremacies. But today a soul formation final stage cultivator suddenly came knocking on their door. And a sword cultivator at that. What did soul formation sword cultivators mean? Unless a perfected immortal descended to the mortal world, no one in the entire cultivation world could afford to offend him. How could he not be excited? Not only was he excited, he even wanted to run 3 laps around the sect to calm himself down. Supremacy. Supremacy, you really want to stay in my Gui sect? Can I? I Ching frowned. That would be a little troublesome. Alright. Fine. Of course. Yulwan immediately nodded his head vigorously. He didn't care why he suddenly came to him. Such a powerful ally had to be kept. Other problems were not a problem. It is an honor for Gui sect to be favored by the supremacy. If the Venerable One stays, my entire sect is willing to serve the Venerable One as the Grand Supreme Elder, and respect you as our elder. There's no need for that. I Ching shook his head. I'm not from your Gui sect. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Sure. Yulwan said even more happily. As long as you leave anything behind, everything will be fine. Venerable One's cultivation is high. This is expected. Preposterous. Before I Ching could reply, Supremacy Tianji finally regained his composure. He turned and glared at everyone unhappily. How can we let such a person of unknown origin join our Gui sect? Have you all forgotten that he destroyed the protective mountain array just now? I wonder what his motive is for suddenly appearing here. Everyone's expression changed. They felt nervous. They knew that Uncle Master Tianji had always been arrogant, and he did have the right to be so. But the person in front of him was a sword cultivator with a higher cultivation level than him. Even if he had such concerns, he could not say it out loud. Wasn't that obviously offending him? Yulwan panicked. Indeed, that sword cultivator's expression suddenly turned cold. He was about to say something to ease the tension when he heard him speak first. Speaking of motives, I do have one. I Ching's gaze fixed on Tianji. Suddenly, some sort of suppressive force swept towards him. Tianji's heart jumped. He could not help but take a step back. But he heard the other party say word by word. Who was the one who said that sword cultivators are useless? Tianji. Yuluan. Everyone. A guess flashed across everyone's mind. He couldn't have come to Gui sect because of that, right? However, I Ching ignored them. With a turn of his hand, he summoned a spirit sword. In the next moment, an overwhelming amount of sword chi swept towards Tianji. He said word by word. Those who are not convinced, come and fight me. Everyone felt their legs turn to jelly. They almost knelt down in the face of this terrifying sword chi. What more Tianji, who was facing this aura? His expression darkened. A sense of danger that he had never felt before rose in his heart. But he still said coldly, "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" He was suppressed by the sword chi just now, because he was not prepared. Did they really think he would lose? Wait. Supremacies. Yuan panicked. A battle between soul formation supremacies was not ordinary. Even if they wanted to fight, they could not do it here. He was just about to persuade them. You're courting death. Tianji had already summoned his Dharma artifact. He rushed over while the other party was unprepared. But before he could get close, a huge aura rushed over. He did not even have time to react. He was sent flying. With a loud bang, he was slammed into the white wall behind him. He felt his blood churning. All the meridians in his body were broken. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone was stunned by this sudden scene. Before they could react, the fight was over. They did not even see how the other party attacked. All they saw was that Tianji was already embedded into the wall. In the next moment they heard a creaking sound. Then they heard a series of rumbling noises. The entire hall looked as if it had been sliced by a knife. Half of it fell to the ground. Only the bottom half, and the white wall that Tianji was embedded in were left standing. This sword was obviously aimed at a crooked angle. If it really landed on Tianji, what kind of terrifying battle power was this? Yuan and his companions were stunned. Especially Shu Yi, who was the closest to Tianji. Her face was so pale that there was no trace of blood. Others might not have felt it because they were far away. But she knew that the sword chi had brushed past her face. If it had been a little more to the side, her head would have been the same as the hall behind her. Although she had transmigrated to many worlds, this was the first time she had been so close to death. A fear that she had never felt before rose in her heart. She used all her strength to stop herself from screaming. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 10. Ding! Original owner's resentment points plus 10. Chapter 656. Shu Yi's face turned even paler, but she called out to the system frantically in her heart. 001. What exactly is going on? Why would there suddenly be a soul formation sword cultivator? There's no such thing in the memories you gave me. Why would Zhou Shuming suddenly get to know such a person? I almost died just now. Do you know that? Tell me clearly. 001 isn't sure about this either. Maybe because the host's appearance disrupted the original plot and caused other effects. You're saying that it's because of my appearance that there's a butterfly effect? You can say that the host stopped him from entering Danxia Mountain and made him enter the outer sect. Didn't he also accidentally get to know Lone Moon? This person doesn't exist in the original owner's memories too? How is this the same? Shu Yi became even more agitated. This is a soul formation sword cultivator, a soul formation cultivator. That Lone Moon is just a foundation establishment idiot. There's no comparison at all. I Ching. Shening. Idiot Lone Moon. The master and disciple both took a step back and looked up at the sky. We didn't hear anything. The information just now was bad. We didn't hear the broadcast. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He turned and glared at the two. Hurry up and do what you need to do. If you say another word, don't even think about eating next month. Alright, Father Nyo, no problem, Father Nyo. Can we stay now? I Ching hurriedly looked at Yuan, who was already stunned. Yuan shuddered. He looked back and forth between I Ching and Supremacy Tianji, who was embedded in the wall, before coming to his senses. He knew that sword cultivators were strong, but he didn't expect them to be this strong. They were both soul formation cultivators, but it was obviously an instant kill. Can Can. Of course you can. He nodded repeatedly, and immediately gave a look to the various peak masters and nascent soul elders, who were still confused behind him. What are you looking at? Hurry and make them stay. Everyone was stunned for a moment before they reacted. They instantly understood. They hurriedly bowed in Chef's direction. Junior greets Uncle Master. No matter what, they had to make them stay first. Although this person seemed to have some misunderstanding with Uncle Master Tianji, they didn't have any opinions about him because of that. The main reason was that the other party was too powerful. The second reason was that Tianji was not very sociable. What's more, what he said in the hall earlier had indeed made everyone uncomfortable. Furthermore, it was indeed Supremacy Tianji who had a loose tongue and insulted sword cultivators first. Of all things, he just had to let others hear it. What's more, it was obvious that Tianji had made the first move in the battle just now. This was especially so for Yuan. The more he looked at this supremacy, the more satisfied he was. To be honest, he was originally a little worried about the matter of keeping him here. In his heart, he also thought that he had other plans, so he was somewhat willing to take a gamble. Now, from the looks of it, with such terrifying strength, if they really had ulterior motives, they could have just annihilated Gui sect. Why would they have to go through so much trouble? Ulterior motives, my ass. I Ching nodded and replied. Then we'll stay in Gui sect from now on. Welcome to our sect, Martial Uncle. Wait a minute. Yuan understood the meaning in his words and was stunned. He looked around and after searching for a while, he realized that there was actually a young lady following behind him. She looked very young. Compared to I Ching, who looked very powerful, there was no trace of spirit chi on her. She looked like she had not started cultivating yet. He subconsciously thought that she could be his friend, or a disciple he had just taken in. Hence he asked politely, "May I know who this fellow Taoist is?" I Ching took a step to the side and replied with a serious expression, "This is my master." He thought of something and added, "Your granduncle master." Yuan. Everyone. Why did he suddenly feel like he had been taken advantage of for no reason? Yet the matter of taking the initiative to call her uncle master was something that they themselves suggested. Yuan looked at the lady for a while. After trying for a long time, he still could not call her granduncle master. He could only change the topic. Looking at Tianji, who was still embedded in the wall, he said, "Uncle Master I Ching, what do you think?" I Ching nodded. Just as he was about to say forget it, he heard a certain someone's voice transmission. He could only reply, "Pill cultivators are only SOSO. Pill cultivator Yuan." All the pill cultivators. They felt like they had been shot in the knee. Yuan had no choice but to instruct the elders to help the person on the wall out. As he wiped his hands, he looked at I Ching and said, "Uncle Master, our sect has a total of 6 peaks. I wonder which peak do you prefer, so that I can send some disciples over to make arrangements?" Logically speaking, the 2 soul formation supremacies of their Gui sect were both staying on Danxia Peak. But it was obvious that this new Uncle Master was not on good terms with Tianji. He must be unwilling, so why would he let him choose? There's no need. I Ching directly rejected his kind offer. Yuan was stunned. Yet he suddenly turned to the left and stood at the edge of the floating peak. He directly raised his hand and waved downwards. A beam of white light instantly flew down. In a short while, he heard a rumbling sound, as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. Even the ground was shaking. A huge mountain suddenly rose from above. It flew higher and higher, and even floated past the main peak, heading upwards. Then it steadily stopped on the highest peak, Danxia Peak. Yuan. He actually directly moved to the top of a mountain peak. The leadership of Gui sect's pill cultivators suddenly felt that they had a deep misunderstanding of sword cultivators in the past. "I'll stay here from now on." I Ching glanced at the newly made floating peak. As for the disciples, just the 2 of them. He pointed at Lone Moon and Zhuo Shuming. Then he brought his master on his sword and flew towards the peak of the mountain. It was finally over. Acting cool was much more tiring than cooking. He even missed Master's mealtime. The news that Gui sect had one more soul formation, sword cultivator, instantly spread throughout the entire sect. Although there were very few people who had seen him before, but the main hall that collapsed on the main peak, and the sudden rise of a floating peak still shocked many disciples. Although the threshold for sword cultivation was low, it was not like other Daos where there were almost no restrictions on spirit roots. But its combat power was the strongest among cultivators. Yet it was also the most difficult and arduous cultivation method. It depended entirely on one's own understanding of the sword Dao. And this understanding mostly came from actual combat. In other words, sword cultivators actually grew up being beaten up. So very few people chose to cultivate the sword. Even if there were people who chose, those who could persevere till core formation and above were even rarer. This was the reason why sword cultivators were rare. Especially in pill cultivator sects like theirs, it was almost impossible for sword cultivators to stand out. Yet their sect had a soul formation sword cultivator. A living one. The kind that could breathe. All the disciples in the sect started to get excited, especially the outer sect disciples, as well as disciples other than pill cultivators. Chapter 657. There were only 2 soul formation supremacies in the entire Gui sect, and Supremacy Tianji never accepted disciples. And Supremacy Tianyi's disciples were already full. This sword cultivator supremacy had just arrived, and it was said that he didn't have any disciples under him yet, and only picked 2 disciples to enter the peak. Then he would have to choose disciples sooner or later, and if he took a liking to them, just a word of advice would be enough for them. For a moment, the entire sect was immersed in the anticipation of that supremacy accepting disciples. Even the news of Shu Yi being accepted as Supremacy Tianji's personal disciple did not attract much attention. This anticipation in the sect lasted for a full 3 months, but on that newly risen floating peak that had yet to be named, there was no movement at all. Not to mention choosing disciples, not even a shadow came out from it. It was said that from Dan Xia Peak below, one could occasionally smell a tempting fragrance drifting down from that floating peak. But for what reason? Speaking of this Dan Xia Peak, as the Peak Lord, Supremacy Tian, he was a little irritable. He also knew that there was an additional soul formation supremacy in the sect, and he was also aware of what happened on the main peak that day. After all, it was such a huge matter that the protective mountain array was instantly broken. It was impossible for him not to know. But at that time, he was in a hurry to refine pills. And seeing that he did not activate the communication talisman, he did not rush over. After knowing that it was Tianji's careless mouth that caused trouble, he did not want to bother. Although the 2 of them were the only 2 soul formation cultivators in the sect, their relationship was not very good. The main reason was that Tianji was too arrogant, and because his cultivation was higher than his, he always did things his own way, never considering what others thought. When he said he didn't want to accept disciples, he didn't accept a single disciple for thousands of years. When he said he didn't want to be a tool for the sect to refine pills, he really didn't refine a cauldron of pills for the sect all these years. But Gui sect still had to operate. There were only 2 high-level pill cultivators in the sect, and he refused to refine. All the work naturally fell on his head, so it was impossible to say that he had no complaints at all. So this time, someone helped him teach this arrogant junior brother a lesson. He was actually quite happy to see it happen, and even specially took the time to take a look at the injured Tianji. More or less, he was still a little happy in his heart, but as he was happy, it turned into sadness, because he discovered that there was suddenly an additional floating peak on Danxia Peak. It was the sword cultivator who had delivered himself to their doorstep, who was floating right above their heads. At first he didn't pay much attention to it, but he soon realized it. He chose Danxia Mount to open a mansion because of its location. This Danxia Mountain was the tallest, with plenty of sunlight and dense spiritual energy. It was the most suitable place for all kinds of spiritual plants, especially high-level spiritual plants. But ever since there was another floating peak above his head, although the spiritual energy wasn't affected, the sunlight was blocked by more than half. For the next few days, His precious spirit herbs were all wilting. He felt both distressed and anxious at the same time. Unable to hold it in any longer, Zhang Xian turned around and flew towards the floating peak above him. So what if he was a sword cultivator? Could he be unreasonable, just because his cultivation was high? He flew to the floating peak with a heart full of anger. But the moment he landed, he was stunned. He looked at the scene in front of him with widened eyes, and subconsciously rubbed his eyes. Who could tell him if he was blind? What did he see? As far as his eyes could see, the entire floating peak was covered with densely packed spirit herbs. And they were all high-level spirit herbs. The dense spiritual energy, mixed with medicinal fragrance, wafted over. And there were quite a number of high-level mutated spirit herbs that even he wasn't sure about. Everything in front of him was simply the ultimate dream of a pill cultivator. What Danxia Mountain, what abundant sunlight, what logic! He instantly wanted to throw it down from this peak. With such a field of spirit herbs, everything had to give way. Tiani swallowed his saliva with difficulty and pinched himself a few times to confirm that it really wasn't a dream. There were indeed high-level spirit herbs growing all over the mountains and plains here. Every stalk was a pill cultivator's dream. And he didn't know if it was an illusion. Although there were many types, these spirit herbs seemed to be completely irregular. On the left was a 6th level one. On the right was a 7th level one, growing extremely randomly. It was as if they were specially planted, or as if they were growing on their own. But in the next moment, he immediately denied this guess of his. Every spirit herb had a different habit. If it wasn't carefully planted, how could there be so many high-level spirit herbs at once? Could it be that the new soul formation cultivator, although he was a sword cultivator, had also studied spirit herbs or pill Dao? His heart instantly burned, and he was even more eager to see that fellow Taoist named I Ching. No, junior brother I Ching. After discussing with him in detail, he completely forgot that he was here to find trouble. He looked left and right, preparing to find someone, but found that the spirit herbs grew too densely. There was no place for him to retreat at all. If he directly flew on his sword, he was afraid of hurting the spirit herbs at his feet and causing the dissatisfaction of that sword cultivator he had never met. For a moment he was in a dilemma. He looked around, intending to see if there was anyone else around who could help him. But this was the foot of the peak, and there was no one around. And he heard that this floating peak only rose a few months ago. Other than that soul formation sword cultivator, there were only 2 disciples left on it. He looked around anxiously, thinking if he should directly send a voice transmission to the disciples of Danxia Mountain below, but suddenly heard a small cracking sound, like the sound of something being chewed. He was stunned for a moment and looked toward the sound. Only then did she discover that there was a woman sitting on a nearby rock. She was holding a red spirit fruit in her hand and gnawing on it. There was also a canteen beside her, and she was looking at him with a bored expression, as if she had been looking at him for a very long time. Tiani was delighted. He did not have time to think when she was there, and hurriedly waved to her. "Miss, that young lady." "Me?" Shenning was stunned for a moment, and tilted her head. Yes, that's you." Tiani nodded repeatedly. "Can you come over and pull me up?" If she used her sword to pull him up, that distance should not hurt the spirit herbs at his feet. "You're stuck?" Shenning asked. Tiani was stunned for a moment, but still nodded. "Yes, trouble this young lady." "Oh, so troublesome." Shenning let out a long sigh, but still chewed on the fruit in her hand, until she finished the fruit and threw away the core. Only then did she move her feet, and slowly climbed up from the rock. Tiani heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that she just did not know his identity, so he did not expose her, and said softly, "Young lady, you only need to." Before he finished, the next moment, he saw a scene that broke his heart. He saw that the young lady suddenly jumped down from the rock, and directly stepped out 2 large pits in the spirit herb field. And then with 1 foot, she dragged the spirit herbs all the way over. She stepped on a large number of high-level spirit herbs, and then stood 2 steps away from him, and generously reached out a hand that still had fruit juice. Tiani puffed. He instantly felt a mouthful of old blood spurt out, and a sky full of stars flashed before his eyes. Chapter 658. At the peak. I Ching glanced at the empty table, put down the vegetables in his hands and turned to Lone Moon. Where's Master? She said she went to water them. As he controlled the flying sword to beat 2 bucks swa, he took the time to reply. We can't let the newly grown spirit herbs on the peak go to waste. With that said, he subconsciously looked up at the sky and silently cursed the bootlicker. How long has Master been gone? I Ching frowned. It's been an hour, right? Lone Moon calculated and the corner of his mouth twitched. Given her character, I don't think she'll be able to get it back. It's time for you to go down and pick her up. I Ching's expression darkened. His figure flashed and followed Xin Ying's aura. In a short while, he found her at the foot of the peak. He saw her carrying a watering can in one hand and dragging something in the other, dragging it step by step towards the peak. With every step she took, a large row of spirit herbs fell. Upon closer look, he realized that it was actually a person. Why did one person come down, but 2 came back? Master. I Ching immediately went down. Chef. Shening looked up and tossed the person she was dragging over to him. Here. It was tiring to drag him. This is. He subconsciously caught the person, only to realize that it was a familiar person. Wasn't it the peak master of Dan Xia Peak, Tianyi? I don't know. Shening handed the watering can over. He said he was stuck and begged me to help. I just went over, and he fainted. Probably old people have poor health. This was a soul formation cultivator. Chef did not ask much. Directly picked up Tianyi, who was dragged for a long time. Hair messy and looked very wretched. He summoned his flying sword and reminded. Master. Lunch is ready, it's time to eat. Lunch. Xin Ying's eyes lit up. She immediately perked up and climbed onto the flying sword. Quick, go, go, go. The 2 of them flew to the peak. The moment they landed, I Ching casually threw the person in his hands. He fell right beside Zhou Shuming, who was already doubting life after being beaten up by Lone Moon, eyes blank, unable to get up. What's this? Lone Moon, who took the opportunity to start his meal, held his bowl and looked back. Upon closer look, he immediately recognized the person on the ground. Tianyi. What happened to him? I'm not sure either, I Ching explained. It seems that the fire of anxiety attacked his heart, causing his spirit chi to flow in reverse, and he fainted. It's not a big deal. I'll wake up soon. You can faint from anxiety. Lone Moon shook his head. As expected, pill cultivators were useless. He suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Shening. What did you do this time? Meow meow meow. Forget it. Lone Moon couldn't be bothered to ask anymore. It was more important to snatch the food. He finally had the upper hand today. Damn. Chef, why are there still dishes in the kitchen? You scheming B***tch. Tianyi was just too depressed for a moment, and woke up after a short while. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw a disciple lying beside him. His 4 legs were spread out, and he was panting heavily. Bean-sized beads of sweat were dripping down like rain. His eyes were blank, and he looked as if his body had been hollowed out. There were also several spiritual swords that were faintly emitting sword chi stuck in the ground beside him. Tianyi got a fright and sat up subconsciously. The eyes of the person beside him moved a little, as if glancing at him, but there was no reaction. Then, he continued panting tiredly. Before he had time to think about what was going on, a male voice came from behind him. Yo, you're finally awake. Tianyi was shocked. He subconsciously turned to look for the voice, only to realize that there were 3 people sitting behind him. On the left was a Foundation Establishment cultivator, wearing the uniform of a Guei disciple. Together with the disciple on the ground beside him, they should be the 2 disciples who were brought up to this floating peak. In the middle was the woman who stepped on a bunch of high-level spirit herbs that he had just seen at the foot of the mountain. His heart suddenly felt a sharp pain, and he immediately turned to look at the man on the far right. That man was dressed in blue, and was pouring tea in his hand. His whole body was filled with sword chi, and there was a faint aura of a soul formation cultivator. He instantly understood that this was the soul formation sword cultivator who came to his door. His heart was filled with excitement. He immediately stood up and said, May I ask, fellow Taoist, are you Supremacy I Ching? I Ching passed the tea that he had poured to Shining beside him, then turned to look over and replied, Tiani became even more excited, and said with some nervousness, then may I ask those spirit herbs at the foot of the mountain? Are they planted by supremacy? I Ching's face darkened. As if he thought of something, he replied after a while, sort of. To be precise, that meddlesome heavenly Tao grew them himself. The other party's eyes widened, as if unable to suppress the joy in his heart. He took a step forward and said, fellow Taoist I Ching. No, now you should call him junior brother I Ching, that spirit. Who's your junior brother? His face suddenly turned cold, and he stood up directly. Little bitch, don't try to make connections. I'm Master's only disciple. Huh. Tian Yi was stunned for a moment. Why did he suddenly get angry? But he had no choice but to continue. Then fellow Taoist, those spirit herbs at the foot of the mountain, can you sell them? I can offer. Not selling. I Ching rejected instantly. Who would sell them to little bitch? This. Tian Yi's face fell instantly, and he had the urge to cry. As a pill cultivator, seeing so many spirit herbs, it would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. What's more, there were many that he had always wanted but never had the chance to obtain. He originally wanted to see on account that they were from the same sect. Could he sell a few to him? However, he didn't expect this new venerable to have such an eccentric temper, directly rejecting him. Yet there was no other way. After all, they were his things. If he was a nascent soul cultivator, it would be alright. At most he would have to pay a little more. But he was also a soul formation cultivator, which soul formation supremacy of the sect did not treat him well. Unless he was willing, even he could not ask for anything from him. Tian Yi's entire person was not good. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. Supremacy I Ching. To be honest, among those spirit herbs, there are some that I have been looking for many years, but never had the chance to see. On account that we are from the same sect, sell me 10, no 5. 3 is fine too. Just name a price. No matter how many spirit stones you have, I'm fine with it. Not selling. I Ching was still stubborn, looking even angrier. Lone Moon, who was watching the show at the side, instantly brightened. Spirit stones. Chef. Supremacy I Ching. On account of supremacy Tian Yi's sincerity, can you sell him a few? He stood up, with a kind expression as if he was trying to smooth things over, but turned and directly sent a voice transmission. Chef, sell it to him. Not selling. I Ching still sent back 2 words. F***CK. He really did not know the price of oil unless he was in charge. Why was he throwing a tantrum in front of such an important matter of earning money? Don't cause trouble, quickly sell it. Not selling. You've freaking grown up, haven't you? Lone Mun's face darkened. Thinking that he could not control him, he turned and glared at the person beside him. Shenying, say it. Ah. I'll approve the expenses for supper. Shenying's expression turned serious, and she turned her head seriously. Chef, sell. Yes, master, no problem, master. Lone Moon. Mother ****. Sell. He thought for a moment before replying. Supremacy, actually, for someone with a cultivation like my supremacies, and a sword cultivator at that, there aren't many things in the world that can interest him. Oh. Tian Yi frowned. This was a little troublesome. But speaking of hobbies, I do have one. Loman's tone changed. Seeing that the other party's face lit up, he said, my supremacy is more special. He doesn't like anything else but spirit stones. What a special hobby. Who doesn't like spirit stones? However, loving spirit stones was good as well. As a level 9 alchemist, what he lacked the least was spirit stones. In other words, as long as he could afford it, he could still come here to buy spirit herbs in the future. Tian Yi's heart instantly settled. Even the way he looked at Lone Moon became more friendly. Thinking of something, he directly took out a level 3 supreme grade Dharma artifact and handed it over. Thank you for your advice, little friend. This spirit sword of mine is just right for you to use. I forgot to accept it. Lone Moon glanced at the level 3 Dharma artifact, but did not accept it. Instead, he asked directly, Can this be exchanged for spirit stones? Tiani. Were all the people taught by sword cultivators like this? The corner of his mouth twitched. He could only turn his hand and take out a small bag of spirit stones. Thank you, Supremacy. Lone Moon accepted it very bluntly. A moment later, as if thinking of something, he lowered his voice and pretended to be mysterious. Supremacy, to be honest, my Supremacy doesn't actually know alchemy. It's a waste to leave all these spirit herbs on the mountain. It's just that you're unlucky. Coincidentally, my Supremacy is in a bad mood today. That's why he was unwilling to sell them previously. If you sincerely sell them, after 2 days when he's in a better mood, I can help to persuade him. By then, if you need the spirit herbs in this mountain, as long as you have spirit stones, anything can be negotiated. Tiani was instantly overjoyed. He grabbed his hand and said, "Little friend, are you serious?" Of course. That's great. He was so excited that his entire body trembled. He had thought that it was good enough to get 3 stocks. He did not expect that he still had a chance. He looked at Loman's sparkling eyes. He looked like he wanted to immediately become sworn brothers with him. If it's really possible, I will not hesitate to help you if you need anything in the future. Well said, well said. Loman's smile became more and more amiable. His brows formed a line. Come, let's talk about the price first. I'll have to trouble you with everything, little friend. 2 hours later, Tiani carefully carried the 3 high-level spirit herbs. He hung an empty storage bag and returned to Danxia Mountain with a smile, as if he had won the lottery. Once he entered the house, he instructed the personal disciple beside him. Lone Moon subconsciously looked over. On the big tree opposite, a piece of human-shaped cured meat was hanging on a high branch, swaying against the wind. The person's eyes had already turned white, and he had completely fainted. And the entire tree, starting from the roots at the bottom, was filled with densely packed spirit swords. The topmost one was even tightly stuck to 2 bucks' buttocks. It seemed that if it was an inch off, he would not be hanging on the tree, but nailed to the tree. Lone Moon. What happened to sparring? How was this sparring? This was obviously a one-sided beating, right? Chapter 660. Ever since Chef joined Guei sect, the 3 of them lived on the tallest floating peak. Their daily mission was to to teach 2 bucks sword techniques. Lone Moon originally wanted to set up a sword array like before, and let him figure it out himself. But 2 bucks foundation was really too poor. Plus he only started cultivating the sword after foundation establishment, and just happened to be in the late stages of foundation establishment. If he was directly thrown into the sword array, he would probably die on the first level. So Lone Moon had to do it himself. Although 2 bucks was not qualified, he was still considered diligent, even if he was beaten half to death every day. The next day he still came up with the sword bitterly. A few years had passed, although his sword techniques were still very touching. But fortunately his resistance to beatings had improved a lot. He already had the constitution of a sword cultivator, who could not be beaten to death. Lone Moon was still a little relieved despite his disdain. And although 2 bucks cultivation did not improve much these few years, the spirit chi in his body was more condensed. He just lacked an opportunity to form his core. Guei sect master, Yuluan also seemed to see that I Ching did not like to be disturbed by others. Other than coming over from time to ask if I Ching needed to recruit a few more disciples into the peak, he did not mention it again after being rejected. Of course, it could also be because there were really no other sword cultivator disciples in the sect. Only Tian-Yi from Danxia Mountain still came up to find Lone Moon reluctantly. The more they chatted, the more they got along. Especially Tian-Yi. Every time he would look like he wanted to become sworn brothers with Lone Moon, calling him Brother Lone Moon. Although he would be cheated of a sum of spirit stones every time, he still enjoyed it. Shu Yi, on the other hand, was quiet. It was said that he went into seclusion after becoming Tianji's disciple. As for Tianji, perhaps because he was embarrassed that day, he unexpectedly became low-key. The 2 did not leave Danxia Mountain again. Even the system's small radio station rarely broadcast. Just when they thought that they still had to live a long time of eating, sleeping, fighting, and occasionally eating more to cheat Tianyi, Yulwan suddenly came to find them with a serious expression. Fiendish cultivator Zhongyi? I Ching frowned. That's right. Yulwan nodded and said anxiously. 500 years ago, his frigid dark fire once destroyed the entire Huangyu sect. None of the 3,000 disciples of Huangyu sect escaped. Now that he has appeared again, I'm afraid he's going to cause trouble again. Sect Master, how can you be sure that the person who appeared in Yuanyang City is this person? Lo Moon could not help but ask. Of course. Yuan took a look at him and sighed. That deviant flame that appeared in the forest outside Yuanyang City is exactly the same as the one that appeared when Imperial Universe sect was annihilated back then. Moreover, 3 days ago, the Peak Lord of Danjin Peak, Taoist Master Yuzi, just happened to pass by there. So he sent a message saying that he was going to investigate, but he never came back. His brows furrowed even deeper, his face full of worry. What about his life token? The life tablet didn't break. Yulwan replied. It's just that his soul lamp is extremely weak, I'm afraid. He didn't continue. But it was obvious that the other party had met with quite a bit of trouble, and probably wouldn't be able to hold on for long. So you hope that Che Supremacy I Ching can go and take a look? Lo Moon corrected himself. Yulwan nodded and said anxiously and worriedly, Uncle Master I Ching, that fiendish cultivator's whereabouts are unfathomable. 500 years ago, all the sects worked together to find no trace of him. At that time, he had just formed his nascent soul. But now we don't know what his cultivation is. Now in our sect, Uncle Master Tianji is in seclusion, and Uncle Master Tian E is at a critical moment of pill refinement. He can't be interrupted. I can only be bold enough to ask you to come out of seclusion. He stood up and bowed solemnly, then added, that Zhongyi suddenly appeared within the boundaries of my Guei sect. He must be plotting something. Now that perfected Yuzi's whereabouts are unknown, I have no choice but to. Chef turned back to look at Lone Moon, then answered, it's not difficult for me to make a trip there. But how am I going to find that perfected Yuzi? He didn't know him. Yulwan's expression lit up. This is junior brother Yuzi's life token. There's a drop of his blood essence on it. As long as you reach Yuanyang City, within a radius of 100 miles, you can sense his location. He took out a jade token and said, Uncle Master I Ching only needs this life token to definitely be able to. Before he could finish, he suddenly heard a cracking sound. The life token in his hand instantly broke into two. A wisp of death chi floated out faintly. Yulwan's expression instantly turned pale. His body unsteady as he sat back down. His face full of sorrow, he sighed. Looks like I'm still a step too late. The life token breaking proved that the other party had already died. Lone Moon and I Ching were also silent. They didn't expect this to happen. That Yuanyang City, I'll go take a look. I Ching replied. The person he was looking for had died, but the matter of the fiendish cultivator was still unresolved. After all, they were now considered part of Guei sect. It was reasonable for them to go take a look. Thank you, Uncle Master. Yulwan nodded with a bitter smile. He suddenly thought of something and said, but there's no hurry now. Wait for me to take inventory of some disciples and follow Uncle Master. I Ching frowned. I can go alone, there's no need for others. If there really were fiendish cultivators, they would also be a burden. Uncle Master has misunderstood. Yulwan hurriedly explained. Many of the people in Yuanyang City were injured by that deviant fire and infected with evil qi. Yuanyang City is an immortal city under my Guei sect. My sect cannot sit back and do nothing, so I intend to send a batch of disciples over to help them get rid of the evil qi. This journey is dangerous, so I'd like to ask Uncle Master to escort them. So that was the case. I Ching nodded. All right. Then thank you, Uncle Master. Yulwan cupped his fists again, as if he didn't expect the other party to be so easy to talk to. Then I'll inform the various peaks to do a head count. We'll set off tomorrow morning. With that said, he didn't stay any longer. He turned and flew away with a solemn expression. Yulwan's speed was very fast. Perhaps because this matter was indeed very urgent. The second day at dawn, a disciple came to inform them that they were about to set off. Thinking that this was a good chance to train, so Lone Moon brought 2 bucks along. The moment they arrived at the main peak where they gathered, they saw a large group of disciples gathered in front of the hall from afar, roughly 40 to 50 of them. Most of them were Golden Core and Foundation Establishment disciples. There was even a nascent soul cultivator leading them. He even looked a little familiar. It was Danshan Peak Lord Shu Yuan. Lone Moon turned to look. Indeed, Shu Yi was there too. Greetings, Uncle Master I Ching. Shu Yuan cupped his fists respectfully and bowed. The other disciples also bowed. Greetings, Grand Uncle Master. I Ching nodded. He didn't dawdle and directly followed everyone onto the spirit ship, heading towards Yuanyang City. Yuanyang City wasn't far from Guiyi sect, but with so many people on the spirit ship, it would take about 2 hours. Lone Moon subconsciously glanced at the invader. Indeed, he discovered that her gaze still swept past Zwishuming from time to time, her expression extremely complicated, as if she was looking at him with disdain and some resentment. He didn't know what she was thinking about. She didn't turn on the broadcast. For a moment he couldn't guess her motive. Is this fellow Taoist? Lone Moon? Suddenly a disciple walked over from the side. His attitude was very respectful as he bowed towards Lone Moon. The other party was dressed in a blue disciple robe. There were special patterns on the sleeves. Looks like he was an advanced disciple of each peak. I am. Lone Moon nodded. This senior brother is? The other party's expression lit up. He immediately introduced himself. I am Danxia Peak disciple Chen Lin. I'm here on Master's orders to bring something for fellow Taoist Lone Moon. Lone Moon was stunned. Danxia Peak? Tiani. Chapter 661. Master knew that fellow Taoist Lone Moon was going to Yuanyang City. Just in case, he prepared some useful items for you. As he spoke, he opened his storage bag and took out a bunch of bottles. This is a blood-clotting pill. This is a spirit-returning pill. This is a qi condensation pill. This is a poison-resisting pill. He stuffed everything over, and finally looked around, handing over an especially small and exquisite bottle. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, "This is a 9th grade 9 revolution soul-returning pill. Master said he only has one left. As long as he still has one breath left, eating this pill can save him. Fellow Taoists must keep it well." Lone Moon, I Ching, Shuning. Suddenly 2 pairs of suspicious squinted eyes were fixed on Lone Moon. Oh, shut up. Lone Moon turned back and glared at the 2. I didn't do anything, alright? Asterisk 2, your sister. What's with that look that says I'm a kept woman? Get rid of that ambiguous wavy line. Don't think too much. How would he know what was wrong with old man Tian Yi? Suddenly sending people to give him so many pills. He was just a proper businessman, bluffing according to procedures. Who knew that old man Tian Yi really believed him? He suddenly felt a little guilty. What's going on? Fellow Taoist Lone Moon? Seeing that he didn't speak for a long time, Chen Lin couldn't help but remind him. His eyes were full of envy. This was a 9 revolution soul-returning pill. Master didn't even give it to him. It was clear that this person had a close relationship with Master. Thank you, senior brother. Lone Moon's mouth twitched, then he took it. Fellow Taoist is too polite. Chen Lin hurriedly waved his hand. Fellow Taoist and my master are of the same generation. I really don't deserve to be called senior brother. Hee. If there's nothing else, fellow Taoist, I'll take my leave first. Glancing at the pills in his hand, he reminded. Please keep these pills well, fellow Taoist. With that said, he turned and left. Lone Moon. He had cheated many people, but this was the first time he saw someone who liked to be cheated so much he couldn't bear it. Forget it. Next time he buys spirit herbs, I'll give him a 9% discount. Here. He turned his hand and shoved these elixirs to 2 bucks beside him. Zwishuming faltered. He hurriedly caught it so that it did not fall to the ground. Lone Moon, this is. Take it. Put it away. Although these things were useless to him, to a true foundation establishment cultivator like 2 bucks, they were really effective. Moreover, all kinds of elixirs were prepared. But Supremacy Tiani gave it to you. I told you to take it, so take it. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Don't you know who's the weakest here? Air. Why did it feel like Brother Loneman's mood had suddenly turned sour? And why did he feel like he was being looked down upon? After thinking about it, Shuming could only silently keep it in his storage bag. Forget it. At most he would keep it for Brother Lomoon first. When he needed it, he would return it to him. Perhaps it was because the situation was really urgent. The journey that was supposed to take 2 hours. They had already reached Yuanyang City half an hour earlier. From afar, they could see that the entire immortal city was covered in a gray evil aura. And wisps of icy cold chi were surging over from the east of the city. The entire immortal city did not have many people either. It seemed rather deserted. Xu Yuan, who was leading the team, frowned. He got off the boat first and immediately activated the immortal city's protective barrier. In the next instant, the array formation in the city lit up. A layer of transparent barrier rose up and protected the entire immortal city within it. The icy cold chi that kept surging over was also isolated outside. When everyone got off, there were already 7 to 8 cultivators waiting in the middle of the city. Perfected Xu Yuan. The one at the front was the city lord. When he saw everyone, his face lit up, and he immediately came forward to welcome them. He saw I Ching at the side and was stunned. This is Supremacy I Ching. Xu Yuan introduced. Supremacy. The other party was shocked and hurriedly bowed again. City Lord Yuan, how's the situation in the city now? Xu Yuan hurriedly asked. The other party then answered, replying perfected. Most of the people in the city who were invaded by the evil chi are ordinary mortals. There are a total of more than 1,000 people. There are also some righteous cultivators who accidentally entered the forest. Especially yesterday, there was a group of cultivators who happened to be coming from the border city. They passed by the forest and were even injured by the deviant fire. I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on for long. You mean that the deviant fire hasn't been extinguished? Xu Yuan was shocked. Indeed not. The city lord's face was also full of worry. His brows furrowed even deeper. Yuanyang City was an immortal city under Guiyi City. Most of the people doing business in the city were outer sect disciples of Guiyi sect. The people in the city had naturally been protected by Guiyi sect. Listening to the city lord's description, it seemed that the matter this time was more serious than imagined. This time, the sect has sent 40 disciples over. Quickly bring them to remove the evil chi for the injured people in the city. Yes, perfected one. The city lord hurriedly responded. Xu Yuan turned back and gave a few instructions to the crowd, asking them to definitely not leave the city. Only then did he let everyone disperse with the city lord to see the injured people. With that said, he turned to look at I Ching beside him. Supremacy, what do you think? I'll go take a look at the place where the deviant fire is. You stay here. With that said, I Ching did not waste any more time. He exchanged a look with Lone Moon and directly flew up on his sword. He brought Shining and headed towards the direction where the cold chi was surging from the east. Almost at the instant they left the city, they felt a wave of cold chi coming towards them. The further east they went into the forest, the heavier the cold chi became. It even faintly carried a chill that seemed to invade one's soul. After flying for less than a while, there was a burning smell in the air. From afar, they could see a patch of charred black in front of them. They could also faintly see traces of white flames spreading outwards. That flame was extremely special. It was different from all other flames. It had no temperature at all. It even carried a chill. It was more like ice than fire. But wherever it passed, it could burn everything. This was I Ching was shocked and subconsciously exclaimed. Dark fire. Asterisk 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 at the same time. In Yuanyang City, a disciple who was planning to help a cultivator, who was burnt by the deviant fire, had just transmitted a trace of spirit chi into the other party. Instantly, a white flame shot out from the other party's body. Ah! The disciple screamed. It was already too late to retreat. Instantly, his entire arm was surrounded by flames. This junior brother, Shuming, who happened to be at the side, was shocked. He subconsciously wanted to pull the person away. Lo Moon reacted quickly. He pulled the person back. Then, he took a step forward and pressed down on the other party's burning right hand. He activated his god power and swept over. Only then did that white flame extinguish. His expression darkened instantly. Why would dark fire appear in the mortal realm? Chapter 662. What's going on? Xu Yuan noticed the commotion and walked in quickly. He looked at the patient on the bed whose breathing was getting weaker, then looked at the disciple who was already sitting on the ground in fear. What happened? Uncle Master Xu Yuan. The disciple paused for a moment, then came back to his senses and answered with some fear. Fire. The fire on this person's body is contagious. The moment I activated my spirit qi, the fire spread to my body. What? Xu Yuan was shocked. His expression darkened as he thought of something. He immediately turned to the disciple beside him and said, Quick! Tell those disciples who are treating the burned people to stop. Yes. The disciple quickly ran out to inform them. Unfortunately, he was still one step too late. A total of 17 people were burned by the residual fire in the forest. 6 of the disciples did not have time to treat them and were saved. The other disciples had already started treating them. Unfortunately, all of them were burned by the fire on their bodies and were seriously injured. Not only did they not save the people, but they also lost 10 disciples. Xu Yuan was so worried that his brows were knitted together. He did not expect that the people who were burned by the frigid dark fire would still have residual fire in their bodies, and that it would even counterattack. One had to know that the people who were treating these people were all Golden Core disciples. They were considered the backbone of the sect. Now that 10 of them had died, how could he not be heartbroken? At this moment, his intestines were green with regret. Yet he did not know how to treat them. Lo Moon's face darkened. The so-called icy dark fire was actually dark fire. It came from the underworld, a deviant fire that attracted dead souls. This kind of fire was extremely cold and could directly burn souls. Not to mention these cultivators from the lower world. Even immortals from the upper world would not be able to withstand it. But how did this fire come to the mortal world, and how did it get caught by a fiendish cultivator? Just as he was thinking, a familiar broadcast sounded beside him. Ding! Analysis complete. High-energy residue body. Host, this is something from another region of this plane. It can burn everything, even souls. That fire is so powerful. Shui was shocked. It's an deviant fire indeed. It's a pity that the host only encountered this little bit of heat. It's not even a flame. If only you could collect more of it. There's more than one person who was burned here. Shu Yi's eyes lit up. When the time comes, we just need to collect more from them. But even so, I can only gather a small amount of the flames. I still need to find the source of the fire before I can fully control it. Don't worry. As long as I have this flame, that person's deviant fire will no longer be able to hurt me. He won't be able to escape. Xu Yi's expression was one of determination. He hurt my master, so he has to pay the price. Besides, he's seriously injured now, and I have the magic tool that master gave me, so I shouldn't be able to run far. Lone Moon frowned. She was here for the fiendish cultivator. And from her tone, she seemed to have seen the fiendish cultivator before. But we can't leave the city. How are we going to find that person? They don't have an isolated space, so they won't be able to deal with this deviant flame in a short time. There's still a lot of time. Tonight, I'll quietly collect the residual fire from these people. Then I'll find a chance to sneak out to look for them. Xu Yi's face was full of confidence. On the other hand, Xu Yuan's face was full of worry. He anxiously paced back and forth in front of the burned disciples. He wanted to help, but he couldn't. He could only look at the disciple beside him and ask, "Have you eaten the elixirs?" "I've already fed them," the disciple answered. But the body-seeping elixir can only temporarily protect their primordial spirits from being burned by the flames in their bodies. It can't completely heal their injuries. What should we do? Xu Yuan became even more anxious. Lo Moon glanced at the happy Xu Yi. He couldn't help but want to cause some trouble. He stepped forward and reminded, Why don't we wait for Supremacy I Ching to come back and take a look? He was only a Foundation Establishment disciple now. Naturally, he couldn't do anything directly. He could only wait for Chef. Xu Yuan was stunned. Then he remembered I Ching. His expression calmed down. That's right. Supremacy will definitely have a way. He heaved a sigh of relief. But he was still a little worried. After all, this was in deviant fire. There were no traces of the fiendish cultivator in the forest. Chef returned very quickly. Almost the moment he returned to the city, he was hurriedly pulled over by Xu Yuan. Uncle Master I Ching, please take a look at these disciples. They can't hold on much longer. I Ching was stunned. He subconsciously turned to look at Lone Moon. Lone Moon directly transmitted 2 words. Dark fire. I Ching understood instantly. He entered the room and saw more than 10 people lying inside. Their bodies were charred black. It was as if something inside their bodies was constantly eating away at their bodies. Their expressions were extremely painful. Uncle Master I Ching, they were deviant Xu Yuan was about to explain. But I Ching directly turned his hand. Immediately, a large patch of glaring red flames appeared. It directly enveloped the 10 people in the room. With a series of crackling sounds, white flames seemed to rise from the disciples' bodies. Then they directly dissipated. He withdrew his hand. The fire in the room was instantly extinguished. It was as if it had never existed. Not even a strand of hair on the people in the room was burned, but their expressions were much more relaxed. Xu Yuan went forward to feel their pulse. Only then did he realize that the deviant fire in their bodies had already disappeared. Uncle Master. Xu Yuan was completely stunned. What was that fire just now? It could actually directly extinguish the dark fire. Uncle Master, you also have in deviant fire? The corner of I Ching's mouth twitched. He bit the bullet and nodded. Yes. What was in deviant fire? That was his true phoenix fire. That's great. Thank you, Uncle Master, for helping. Xu Yuan's heart relaxed. Not only because all the disciples were saved, but because Uncle Master I Ching's deviant fire could actually suppress the fiendish cultivator Zhong Yi's dark fire. This way, their Gui sect would not have to worry about Zhong Yi harming the sect. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Only Xu Yi's face darkened. What's going on? Why can he deal with that deviant fire? The heat in the target's body has completely disappeared. Perhaps because it encountered a higher energy heat, it was dispersed. Higher energy? Are you saying that the deviant fire in his body is stronger? She had not even started to collect it when it was dispersed. You can say that. Xu Yi's face turned green. So the opportunity that was right in front of her disappeared just like that. But there was nothing she could do. I wonder if Uncle Master has found any traces of Zhong Yi outside the city? Xu Yuan thought of serious business and turned to ask. No. I Ching shook his head. He is no longer in that forest. He only left behind some deviant fire that had not been completely burnt. I wonder what this fiendish cultivator is up to. He suddenly appeared near Gui sect and killed a nascent soul elder. Now he disappeared without a trace. Xu Yuan's frown deepened. He was getting more and more worried. He could only urge the disciples to speed up the treatment process so that they could return to the sect as soon as possible. After all, they were only Foundation Establishment and Golden Core disciples. If anything happened, they would not be able to stop it. Chapter 663. Nightfall. Lone Moon told the 2 of them what he had heard in the morning. That fiendish cultivator who can use the dark fire knows Tianji? I Ching paused. I'm afraid it's not just that. Lone Moon shook his head. From what the intruder said, the 2 of them had already fought. Tianji even seemed injured. The demonic qi on his body earlier must have something to do with this fiendish cultivator. So he appeared this time to seek revenge on Tianji? Chef frowned. If that's the case, why didn't he go straight to Gui sect? Why did he hide in this small city and even kill a nascent soul elder? Wasn't he trying to attract attention by creating so much hatred? Or did this fiendish cultivator really think he was invincible? Maybe he's not seeking revenge? Shenning suddenly said. The 2 of them paused. What did she mean? If he's not seeking revenge, why is he doing this? Lone Moon blurted out. He came all the way to Gui Sek's immortal city. Could he be fleeing? He paused halfway through his sentence. His eyes widened. You're not going to say that he didn't go to Gui Sek to cause trouble, but escaped from Gui Sect, are you? Shenning took a bite of her fruit. Isn't it obvious? Holy shit. How is it obvious? He thought about the broadcast carefully and realized that it was really possible. Shui seemed to have known about the dark fire from the start and wanted to collect it for her own use. Tianji even gave her a Dharma artifact specially used to deal with the fiendish cultivator. They were too well prepared. If that wasn't because they were very familiar with the fiendish cultivator, what was it? Initially, he thought that it was because Tianji had fought with the fiendish cultivator. Now, it seemed that it wasn't just that. Shu Yi's confident look clearly showed that she did not think much of the fiendish cultivator. A golden core cultivator was not afraid of a fiendish cultivator, who was at least a nascent soul cultivator. That proved that she had absolute confidence that the fiendish cultivator would not be able to hurt her. Perhaps it wasn't just because of the system. In other words, the biggest possibility was that the fiendish cultivator was also seriously injured. This injury was obviously caused by Tianji. However, they had been in Gui Sect for so long. However, he had never sensed a demonic cultivator barging in, let alone a deity transformation cultivator and a nascent soul cultivator. It was impossible for there to be no movement at all. All these years, Tianji had never left Gui Sect. When did they fight? If it wasn't recently, it was definitely before they entered Gui Sect. That would be interesting. They had been in Gui Sect for a few years now. Zhongyi had been seriously injured for so many years, but he had not recovered at all. Even a golden essence cultivator was not afraid of him. That was impossible. Unless someone was watching him at all times, not letting him recover. This person was none other than Tianji. In other words, Zhongyi might have been in Gui Sect from the start. He appeared in Yuanyang City, not to find trouble with Gui Sect, but to escape from Gui Sect. Why would Tianji capture a fiendish cultivator and hide him in the sect? Lo Moon did not understand. Was this man crazy? Fiendish cultivators and Dao cultivators have completely different systems. Furthermore, he's a soul formation cultivator. What could a nascent soul fiendish cultivator have that he covets? He stopped mid-sentence as he suddenly thought of something. It's the nether fire. He almost forgot that he was a core cultivator. Didn't he need the nether fire? No wonder Yuan and Tian, he often complained about this soul formation uncle master. He was arrogant and did not care about anything in the sect. Not only did he not accept disciples, he did not even help to refine the pills in the sect. Only Tian, he had a hard time refining pills every day. Now that he thought about it, it was not that he did not want to refine pills. It was because he had not completely refined the nether fire on the fiendish cultivator. That was why he could not refine pills and could not kill him. He did not accept disciples probably because he was afraid that others would find traces of the fiendish cultivator. The key was that he seemed to have failed. Not only did he escape, he almost became a fiendish cultivator. The more Lone Moon thought about it, the more embarrassed he felt. This invader really found a good backer that was similar to him? Almost as unlucky. The invader went out. I Ching suddenly said. Lone Moon was stunned. He immediately said, "Follow him." The three of them flashed and disappeared from the house in the next moment. They were about to follow Shu Yi's aura when they realized that the aura was suddenly cut off. The three of them lost their direction. Lone Moon's face darkened. He knew that it was the system's doing. How were they going to find her now? Just as they were thinking about whether to split up and look for her, an especially clear broadcast sounded in the sky above the silent immortal city. It immediately pointed the direction for the three of them. "Host, I have already shielded all your aura. No one can find you now." The three of them who had already found her. They had never seen such a cooperative invader. The three of them flew over. Indeed, they saw Shu Yi who was about to leave the city. The strange thing was that she was not heading towards the forest in the east, where the nether fire appeared. Instead, she was heading in the opposite direction towards the west. She was holding something in her hand. From time to time, red light shone from it. It looked like a Dharma artifact that was used to find directions. She headed all the way to the west. After a while, she stopped in a dark and quiet place. She could faintly see undulating mounds of soil around her. This was a graveyard. It's here. 001, scan this area. Host. I did not expect to find any living beings. They should have been shielded. Master said that this demon, Zhongyi, is best at array formations. He should be hiding. She scanned the graveyard in front of her. He really knows how to hide. If not for Master's thoughtfulness and preparation of this tracking seal, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to find him. She laughed coldly and walked directly towards the graveyard. She even deliberately lightened her footsteps and stared at the direction indicated by the Dharma artifact in her hand. The three of them who were in the air exchanged a look. They directly used their divine perception to scan the area. Instantly, they found that on the right side, there was a graveyard overgrown with weeds. There was a trace of the evil aura of a fiendish cultivator. They could faintly see a figure curled up in a coffin underground. Because it was a graveyard, the death aura and evil aura were mixed together, and it was extremely difficult to distinguish. Yet it did not escape the three of them. Indeed, in a short while, Shui had already turned and walked towards the right. She looked around and stopped in front of the most inconspicuous graveyard that was overgrown with weeds. Lone Moon was hesitating whether to make a move. Shui, on the other hand, looked delighted. A strange light flashed in her eyes. Without hesitation, she took out a Dharma artifact and chanted a spell. She was about to activate the Dharma artifact and throw it out. Soon that deviant fire would be hers. Senior Sister Shu. Suddenly, a figure darted out from the side and grabbed Shu Yi's hand. She lost her grip, and the artifact fell to the ground with a thud, landing right on her feet. Ow! Shui cried out in pain. She lifted one foot and jumped a few times on the spot. Only then did she see who it was. Zua Shuming. Senior Sister Shu, what are you doing here? Zua Shuming looked at her blankly. His expression was one of concern. It's very dangerous at night. Why are you here? Shui was completely stunned. I chased you all the way here. Zua Shuming said matter-of-factly. I'm on night duty tonight. I'm guarding the West City Gate. When I saw you leave the city, I followed you. What happened to you, Senior Sister Shu? Why are you limping? Are you alright, Senior Sister Shu? Don't scare me. Shui, Lone Moon, I Ching, Shining. How did this fellow get here? Indeed, Zua Shuming was born to counter this invader, wasn't he? Chapter 664. With Shu Yi's delay, the demonic cultivator hiding below had already sensed something amiss. Suddenly, a white light flashed and a large amount of white flames, carrying with them an icy aura, rushed out from the graveyard in front of them, illuminating their surroundings with a snow-white light. The ground immediately cracked, and the flames rushed towards the two of them, like a tidal wave. Ding! High energy source detected. Shu Yi's eyes were filled with joy. She urged in her heart, Quick! 001. Isolate this deviant flame and capture it. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand towards the flames. Faint specks of light appeared in her hand, and she was about to touch the dark flames. Senior Sister Shu, be careful. Zua Shuming suddenly flew towards Shu Yi. Instantly, he sent her flying 4 to 5 feet away from the range of the dark flames. As he used too much force, he crashed into the sticky mud at the side. Ding! Out of range, capture failed. There are 4 hours left until the next isolation period. The three of them watching from above. Were they really unnecessary? / Yet Zua Shuming did not seem to notice anything. He summoned his spirit sword and waved it around to block the endless flames. At the same time, he asked worriedly, Senior Sister Shu, are you alright? This deviant flame suddenly appeared. Could it be that the fiendish cultivator is here? It's too dangerous. Senior Sister Shu, answer me. A while later, Shu Yi's grip tightened. She used both hands to pull her face out of the ground. Her entire face was covered in mud. Boundless rage erupted from her body. She was so angry that her entire body seemed to be on fire. She summoned a spirit sword and charged towards Swashuming. "I'll kill you." Swashuming was shocked. He could only turn around to block her attack. He looked confused. "Senior Sister Shu, why are you doing this? The fiendish cultivator is over there." "Host, calm down. He can't die yet. The original owner's resentment has not dissipated yet." 001 panicked and hurriedly spoke up. "To hell with your resentment." Shui had completely lost her mind. She raised her sword and slashed at Swashuming. She had forgotten all about spells and sword techniques. "I want to kill him. I must kill him. I have to kill him. Host, this mission will fail." "To hell with your mission. Host, be careful." 001 suddenly cried out in alarm. Taking advantage of the internal conflict between the two, the demonic cultivator emerged from the ground. With a wave of his hand, streams of demonic energy condensed into black wind blades mixed with white nether flames flew towards the two. Shu Yi's heart turned cold. Only then did he react. He quickly took out the Dharma artifact and threw it out. With a flash of red light from the magic tool, the demonic cultivator's movements suddenly trembled, as if he was in great pain. His entire body curled up into a ball and let out a blood-curdling scream. Even the surrounding white flames became sluggish. "It was you." The fiendish cultivator seemed to understand something. His eyes turned red, and his face contorted even more. It was filled with hatred, as if he wanted to eat Shu Yi alive. Tianji sent you here. I'm going to kill you." He roared angrily, and his eyes turned even redder. As if he had made up his mind, he suddenly gritted his teeth and stabbed his hand into his chest. Blood flowed everywhere. Swashuming and Shu Yi were stunned. They did not know why he was suddenly hurting himself. The blood on his chest suddenly turned black. In the next moment, thick black chi exploded from his body and spread out in all directions. It spread out in all directions, and waves of bone-chilling cold air came rushing over. The three people in the air frowned. This was demonic chi. Shu Yi's heart sank. Suddenly she heard a crack. The round Dharma artifact above her head suddenly broke and fell to the ground. The red light that was suppressing the fiendish cultivator also disappeared. She was shocked. How was this possible? She could not help but panic. The expression of the demonic cultivator, Zhong Yi, who had originally hated Shu Yi to the bone, suddenly calmed down, and his entire person became even more sinister. A strange smile appeared on his skinny skeleton-like face, as if he had become a different person in an instant. He suddenly opened his mouth and muttered, "Revenge? As you wish." But he was not talking to the two people in front of him. It was as if he was talking to himself. The system's voice rang in her ears. "Warning! Danger! Danger! Detected a creature from a higher region in this plane. Host, please move quickly." Shui felt a chill run down her spine. Her hair stood on end. She vaguely felt that the person in front of her was no longer Zhong Yi. But it was too late to run now. The other party raised his hand. Countless black chi surged towards them with a frightening murderous aura. Wherever it passed, even the grass and trees withered and withered. Swashuming's expression darkened. He tightened his grip on his sword. "Senior Sister Shu, hurry back and inform." Before he could finish speaking, Shu Yi had already crushed the teleportation talisman in her hand. In the next moment, a white light shone and enveloped her entire body. She was about to disappear. The fiendish cultivator suddenly snorted. Trying to run? The black demonic chi swept over. The white light on Shu Yi's body dissipated. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. She remained in her original position. "Senior Sister Shu." Swashuming's sword moved again. He immediately swung the demonic chi away. But it was useless. The demonic chi around them became even thicker. The fiendish cultivator's expression darkened. He laughed coldly. "As the price of sacrifice, none of you can escape." With that said, the sky full of demonic chi surged towards them. It looked like the two of them were about to be swallowed. The three people who had been watching from above finally landed. I Ching waved his hand. Instantly, sword chi flowed in all directions. The originally pitch-black demonic chi dissipated instantly. Hey, $2, are you alright? Lone Moon turned back to look. Brother Lone Moon? $2 faltered. When he saw I Ching in front of him, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Supremacy. Who are you? The fiendish cultivator. No, he should be called a demon now. He looked at I Ching with some fear. I Ching did not reply. He was just an earth demon. He had no interest in talking at all. Lone Moon also turned to the two people behind him. It's too dangerous here. You guys hurry back to the city. No, Zhou Shuming retorted subconsciously. Xu Yi's expression darkened. As if afraid of exposing something, she immediately took out another teleportation talisman and crushed it. In the next moment, she disappeared on the spot. I asked you to leave. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Hindrance. How can I leave Brother Lone Moon here? Zhou Shuming still refused to move. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He sighed. Then, he pulled the person who was chewing on a fruit beside him. Then take good care of her. Don't lose her. Zhou Shuming. Was Miss Shin some valuable item? She needed to be taken care of? Shening. Son of AB *TCH. Chapter 665. Who are you people? The demon looked at them coldly and frowned slightly, as if dissatisfied with their sudden interruption. But he didn't think much of them. Forget it, none of you can escape anyway. They didn't answer. Lone Moon stepped forward and asked, You're an earth demon, right? The demon paused and looked at him in surprise. I didn't think that there would be someone in this mortal realm who could recognize my true form. I kind of want to leave your corpses intact. Enough. Lone Moon interrupted her and asked, Don't pretend. Tell me, where did you get the dark fire? Humph. Arrogant and ignorant mortal. The demon was angry. He snorted and said, Do you think you can be so arrogant with a soul formation cultivator here? Not to mention that you have not become immortals. Even if an exalted immortal from the upper realm is here, my dark fire can still burn him clean. With that said, he raised his hand, and a ball of white flame appeared in his palm. Lone Moon's face darkened. We're all demons like this. He felt uncomfortable if he didn't get beaten up. The corner of his mouth twitched. He turned to look at I Ching and said, Chef, do it. The kind that leaves us some breathing space. Chef waved his hand and summoned a spirit sword. Humph. You overestimate yourself. The earth demon waved his hand, and a white flame rushed toward them. It looked like it was about to burn I Ching. But in the next moment, a fiery wall of fire suddenly appeared. It had an aura that could burn everything, and it burned back at them. In an instant, the white flame seemed to be swallowed up by a spark, and was extinguished with a few pops. How is this possible? The demon was completely stunned. His heart sank, and he subconsciously took a step back. Immediately afterward, the overwhelming sword chi pressed down on him. It was so dense that he didn't even have the space to breathe. He felt a chill in his heart, and cold sweat covered his entire back. The confidence he had just now was instantly shattered into pieces. This terrifying power was not the power of the lower realm. No, not even the upper realm. His underworld fire had been completely extinguished, and the fiery red flames were about to burn his body. Old demon instantly, without any hesitation, fell to his knees and shouted, I was wrong. Exalted Goddess, please spare me. If there's anything that Exalted Goddess needs to know, I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Please give me a chance to speak, Exalted Goddess. I Ching. Lone Moon. Shening. Zhou Shuming. Sure enough, being tactful was a basic virtue that every demon must have. Straight face, tell me what's wrong with you. Lone Moon gestured for Chef to retract the true phoenix fire. He stepped forward and asked, Did you just take over this mortal's body? Where's his soul? Yes. Old demon immediately nodded. Afraid that they would misunderstand, he quickly said, He just traded his vitality to me. His soul is still in his body. I'm just a little demon. I can't swallow other people's souls. With that said, he instantly turned into a wisp of black smoke, and floated out of his body, curling into a black ball. And the body of the fiendish cultivator Zhongyi fell directly to the ground dead. Lone Moon glanced at him, Indeed, his soul was still in his body. It was just that he voluntarily gave his vitality to Old Demon. Even if Old Demon left his body, he was already a dead man. The few of them immediately turned to look at that ball of black chi. This has nothing to do with me. Old Demon's entire ball of black chi trembled. He hurriedly said honestly, He voluntarily gave his vitality to me. I can't refuse, right? What's more, his injuries are too serious. He's really at the end of his life. Even if he didn't give me his vitality, he wouldn't live for more than a few days. Lone Moon sighed, then went forward and conjured a seal, sending that fiendish cultivator's soul into samsara. As a demon, how did you come to the mortal world? He continued to ask. Where's your body? Why is there only your primordial spirit left? And a ball of chi with vitality. That's a long story. Old Demon sighed. He said bitterly. Actually, I don't know what happened either. I was originally a little demon in the demon world. Then I got seriously injured in a fight with other demons. I thought I couldn't be cured. But when I woke up, I found myself in this mortal's body. As for how I came to the lower realm, I don't know either. Then what about the dark fire? Lone Moon continued to ask. Mortals can't come into contact with the dark fire. You were the one who brought it here. Exalted Goddess, I really don't know. The ball of demonic chi trembled even more violently. When I woke up, that ball of fire was already in my body. At first it was quite warm and obedient, but then it got colder and colder. That Zhongyi tried to subdue that dark fire a few times, but he suffered from the backlash. We thought of many ways to move it out, but it still didn't work. You're saying that you don't know how that dark fire came to be? Yes. He nodded vigorously. Not only can that fire not be subdued, it can also corrode the soul at any time. It was only when the exalted goddess released that it completely got rid of it. He looked at I Ching curiously, wanting to ask but not daring to do so. That flame looked even scarier than the dark fire. Exalted Goddess, I really don't know what happened. Previously, I was trapped in Zhongyi's body, and I couldn't move. Then Zhongyi was locked up by Tianji for a few hundred years. Even if I wanted to harm him, I couldn't do anything, right? So you tricked him into giving you his life. Lone Moon narrowed his eyes. I was wrong. The Earth Demon instantly cowered. He just wanted to take over this body. Who knew that it would end before he could even have any fun? Lone Moon frowned. It seemed like the Earth Demon really brought the dark fire to the fiendish cultivator. But why did the dark fire appear in the Earth Demon's primordial spirit? And from what he said, the dark fire didn't work on him in the beginning. What should we do with this Earth Demon? I Ching looked at the demon. Although he didn't even have a body, and was so weak that even ordinary demons could trample him to death, I Ching couldn't let him stay in the mortal world forever. What else can we do? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at the ball of demonic chi. Throw him back. With that said, he took out a transmission talisman and sent a bit of immortal chi into it. A moment later, Yu Hong's voice came through. Elder Lone Moon? Yu Hong, is Little Black in the sect? Yu Hong paused for a moment then replied. Yes. Do you need me to call him over? Later, we'll send a delivery back. Lone Moon picked up the demon and said. Ask Little Black to handle it. Yes. I Ching raised his hand and drew a line, instantly opening the realm gate. Lone Moon turned and threw the ball of demonic chi into it. Yu Hong, do you see it? Yes, I see it. That's it then. Lone Moon then cut off the communication. Yu Hong looked at the things in her hands. Elder Lone Moon had sent many things back, but most of them were immortal stones, Dharma artifacts, spirit herbs and all kinds of precious treasures. This was the first time she received a ball of demonic chi. Most importantly, it was for Little Black. An hour later, Little Black received a message from his wife, saying that she had something for him. He was full of joy as he sped up from the demon world. What the hell? Why did his wife give him a ball of demonic chi? And a half-crippled earth demon at that? Suddenly he thought of something. His face instantly paled, and his entire demon king felt terrible. He hugged Yu Hong and wailed. Xiao Hong, you actually have another demon outside. Tell me honestly, do you want to divorce me? I don't agree. No. Little Hong, What did I do wrong? I'll change, alright? Yu Hong, the trembling earth demon. MD's easy. Chapter 666. Yuanyang City. Chef, where do you think the dark fire came from? Lone Moon turned to look at I Ching. Logically speaking, the dark fire was in the divine underworld. Even if the other party was a demon, he could not have brought it back from the divine underworld. Not to mention that he was just an earth demon. Even Little Black did not have the ability to break through the realm gates of the divine underworld to obtain the dark fire. I Ching frowned and shook his head. Logically speaking, with Shorty in the divine underworld, there should not be any dark fire left in the mortal world, or the divine underworld. That might not be the case, Shining suddenly said. The two of them paused and turned back. What do you mean? Isn't there a hole? She replied. Hole. Lone Moon paused and suddenly thought of something. You mean the hole in the river of forgetfulness in the divine underworld? Master means. I Ching also reacted. That dark fire fell from the river of forgetfulness? Shining nodded. The two of them thought about it carefully. It was indeed possible. The dark fire was used by the divine underworld to receive souls. It was normal for it to appear in the river of forgetfulness. And that earth demon said that he was seriously injured and thought that he would not wake up. Now it seemed that it was not just a thought. Instead, he was already dead. His soul returned to the river of forgetfulness and went to the divine underworld. But before he could reincarnate, the invader broke a hole in the river of forgetfulness. He was probably in that position and was squeezed down to the lower world together with the dark fire, falling into Zhongyi's body. This could explain why he felt that the dark fire did not have any attack power at first. Because he was originally a dead soul, the dark fire naturally had no effect on him. But he was in that fiendish cultivator's body, and was more or less infected with the other party's vitality. The dark fire would naturally burn him, and he did not know anything just now, as if he did not remember much. It should be because he entered the river of forgetfulness that his memory was erased, but not completely erased. I remember Shorty said that a soul was lost in the river of forgetfulness. Lone Moon suddenly remembered this. Could it be this earth demon? I Ching's expression darkened, and he nodded in agreement. It was obvious. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. At the end of the day, it was still that invader's fault. It seemed like they had to quickly resolve this matter. Otherwise, who knew what kind of mess the other party would create for them to clean up? Their speed was still a bit too slow. They had to make use of this time to improve their cultivation. A lot of training plans flashed through Lone Moon's mind. Zhou Shuming, who was meditating next door. Why did he suddenly feel a chill down his spine? Hearing that the fiendish cultivator Zhong Yi had been dealt with, Xu Yuan heaved a huge sigh of relief. He no longer looked nervous and serious, but relaxed completely. He smiled brightly at I Ching and said, Uncle Master, indeed. You actually dealt with this demon so quickly. But how did Martial Uncle find this demon? It wasn't me, I Ching replied. Ha! Xu Yuan was stunned, not understanding what he meant. Zhou Shuming, who was at the side, said with a serious expression, Elder Xu, actually this matter is all thanks to Senior Sister Xu. No, Uncle Master Xu. If she had not found traces of this fiendish cultivator outside the West City, Supremacy I Ching would not have found this demon so quickly. You mean Little E? Xu Yuan was shocked. A trace of worry flashed across his eyes. She left the city last night? That's right. Zhou Shuming nodded vigorously. Uncle Master Xu must have been worried that this demon would harm the senior and junior brothers. That's why she stayed up all night, and finally found the fiendish cultivator's hiding place. Although the process was a little dangerous, at least it was resolved. Uncle Master Xu is indeed a golden core. Before he could finish, Xu Yuan's expression darkened, and he said angrily, She's getting more and more reckless these days. She doesn't even listen to me, her father. With that said, he left the few of them behind, and turned to leave angrily. Elder Xu. Why did he leave just like that? Zhou Shuming turned back to look at the three of them innocently. Did I say something wrong just now? Lone Moon. I Ching. Shining. He was indeed a professional hater of Xu Yi. Why did he have to be completely calm and collected about it? ____. Shu Yuan of Danshan Mountain was an especially strict person. Whether it was to his disciples or to his own daughter, he was especially strict with them. What's more, he was also the hall master of the discipline hall. He was in charge of the punishment of all the disciples in Guiyi sect. He had always been selfless. One could say that he was an overly righteous person. Shu Yi had left the city secretly in the middle of the night. Of course, she had gone against the rules. Zhou Shuming blurted out. His hater hit the nail on the head. There was no doubt that there would be an argument between the father and daughter. But Shu Yuan did not punish her too severely. After all, she was Tianji's personal disciple. Since she had already entered the sect, all her punishments and rewards had to be handed over to Tianji. Even if Shu Yuan was her father, he would not be able to interfere. But in the next few days, Shu Yi did not come out again. Without the threat of the fiendish cultivator, the mission this time progressed especially quickly. The disciples only stayed in the city for 4 days. Those who had been affected by the evil qi were more or less healed. Shu Yuan left some elixirs and led the disciples away on the spirit boat. Zhou Shuming then saw Shu Yi, whom he had not seen for a few days. He subconsciously went forward to greet her. Uncle Master Shu Yu get lost. Before he could finish speaking, Shu Yi suddenly turned and glared at him. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. She wanted to poke a few holes in his body. Zhou Shuming froze. He even forgot to put down his hand that was about to greet her. But she snorted coldly and boarded the spirit boat. Then, she found a seat furthest away from him and sat down with her back facing him. It was as if she would not be able to suppress her anger if she looked at him one more time. Zhou Shuming, who had wanted to ask about her injuries, slowly put down his hand. Instantly, he felt that something was blocking him. He turned and nudged the person beside him. Brother Lone Moon, what's wrong with senior sister Shu? Why did she suddenly become so fierce? Her gaze seemed to want to kill him. You don't know? Lone Moon gave him an indescribable look. You've already tricked her so many times. Don't you have any F***king idea? I don't know. Zhou Shuming looked confused. I found it strange before. It seems that ever since we moved out of the main peak, she became strange? Lone Moon glared at him. I'm giving you a look to figure it out yourself. Could it be? He suddenly thought of something. His expression was one of shock. What? He looked around and lowered his voice nervously. Do you think she knows that I don't like how she used to be? That's why she deliberately became like this to attract my attention? Lone Moon. I Ching at the side. Straight face. He was speechless. A while later, 2 pieces. Lone Moon took a deep breath and patted his shoulder. Huh. I say, you right? Although you're ugly, you're quite wishful thinking. He vaguely felt that he had been stabbed. After thinking about it, he could not help but retort. But she really changed a lot. In the past she was very warm to us. Now, she doesn't even care about Miss Shen. How do you know that she doesn't care about Xining? They didn't even know each other. I saw it. Zhou Shuming turned and pointed opposite him. Lone Moon subconsciously turned back. He saw that Shu Yi, who was sitting alone just now, suddenly had an additional figure beside her. He supported his head with one hand and held a fruit in the other. As he nibbled on it, he tilted his head and looked at Shu Yi seriously. They were so close that they were almost touching each other's faces. Yet, Shu Yi did not seem to notice. Holy shit! Lone Moon stood up abruptly. When did that fellow go over? Is identical to. Chapter 667. Xining, what are you doing? Lone Moon transmitted. Huh? Xining turned back to look. Huh, what? Why did you suddenly go over there? Don't be discovered by the intruder. I'm studying it. Studying? Who would go up there to study it? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Xining did not reply, but continued to stare at the person in front of her, not forgetting to nibble on the fruit. Yet the other party did not react at all, still sitting cross-legged in the same place. Until, wait, Xining. Lone Moon was shocked. Perhaps because she was too bored, she suddenly reached out a finger and poked the other party's face. Shu Yi's angry face sank instantly, Even her face became crooked. Shui then reacted, and was instantly shocked. Who are you? When did this person get here? She actually did not see her at all. Subconsciously, she called the system's small broadcast. 001, what's going on? Why didn't you warn me that someone was coming? Host, I did not sense it either. Perhaps the energy waves on this person's body are too weak to be detected, so I did not get scanned. Shui took a closer look, only to find that there was no spirit chi in the other party's body. She was actually immortal, but why would such a person be on the spirit boat? She frowned. What do you want? Air. Shenning stiffened, then seriously handed over the fruit in her hand. Do you want to eat the fruit? Shui glanced at the half-eaten fruit in her hand, and her expression darkened. She suddenly poked her, just to ask if she wanted to eat the fruit? Instantly, she felt a little angry, did not expect there to be such a rude disciple in the sect, and directly replied coldly, no need. Oh. Only then did Shenning shrink back, and continue to take a bite. In the next moment, the system broadcast sounded again. Host, hurry and accept it. That is 1,000-year-old red mystic fruit. Eat it and your cultivation will directly increase by 1 level. What? Shui was shocked, and said with some anxiety. Why didn't you say so earlier? I've just detected it as well. Shuyi's expression changed. She could not miss a fruit that could increase one's cultivation by 1 level. She took a deep breath, then squeezed out a stiff smile, looked at Shenning and said, Junior sister. Shenning turned to look at her. This fruit. Before she could finish, Shenning suddenly lowered her head and sped up like a squirrel. In the blink of an eye, she had finished half of the fruit in her hand, leaving only the core. She wiped her mouth and asked, What's wrong? This is intentional, right? Definitely. For all. Ngunguo, host quick. Ask her to keep the core of the fruit and plant it in the system shop. It might be able to survive. Shui came back to her senses and was immediately overjoyed. Junior apprentice sister, this fruit core, Kacha. Shenning clenched her fists and broke the core of the fruit into 2. She picked out the kernel and stuffed it into her mouth right in front of I Ching. She swallowed it with a few slurps and turned back to look at I Ching. You want it? Here. As he spoke, he stuffed the drenched nuclear fragment into the other party's hand. Shui. The system. Why do I feel like I've been played? Master. Before she could react, I Ching had already hurried over to save the situation. He glanced at Shui. If he did not interrupt, he was afraid that Shui would be embarrassed into anger. Shui suppressed the anger in her heart, and had no choice but to stand up and bow. Greetings, Supremacy I Ching. I Ching did not reply and only looked at Shenning. Master, breakfast is ready. It's time to eat. Oh. Shenning then stood up and followed I Ching into the ship's cabin. Time to go. Shuyi's expression darkened. Looking at the 2 people walking away, she finally understood their identities. This new sword cultivator Supremacy had a mortal master. She had heard that it was her. She did not expect it to be her. No wonder she had the Zhuxian fruit. Thinking about how she actually missed out on half of the Zhuxian fruit, she instantly regretted it. If she had that fruit, it would be much easier for her to form a nascent soul in the future. On second thought, she remembered that Zhuxiang was now on the other party's floating peak. Her heart was filled with even more hatred. No, she had to hurry to suppress Zhuxiang and reduce the original owner's resentment value. Otherwise the mission would really fail. System. What is the original owner's resentment value now? Original owner's resentment value. 65. Shui felt a sense of danger that she had never felt before. After returning to Guiyi sect, Shui directly went into seclusion. Lone Moon checked from time to time, and found that her cultivation was indeed rising very quickly. There were faint signs that she had already entered the middle stage of Golden Core. On the other hand, Zhuxiang's cultivation had not changed ever since he reached the late stage of foundation establishment. No matter how hard he cultivated, there was no sign of him forming a core at all. Lone Moon understood that he just lacked an opportunity. However, this opportunity did not come for a long time. He originally thought that this trip to Yuanyang City would allow him to gain enlightenment or something. In the end, apart from angering Shui half to death, nothing else happened. This was the first time he saw someone's cultivation rising so slowly. If this continued, he might have formed a nascent soul, and he would still be looking forward to the foundation establishment stage. Disciples were not enlightened. Most likely they lacked beatings. They would get used to it after a few more times. It was just that this Zhuo Shuming had no other advantages. The more he beat him, the tougher he became. In the past he would fall in seconds. Now he could actually last a few seconds in his hands. Hence, as he beat him, he got tired of it. He really could not take it anymore. He directly threw him into the sword array. Hence, the 10-level sword array reappeared in the pugilistic world. Zhuo Shuming wailed at the bottom for a few years, before he slowly got used to the sword array. At least he could come out in one piece. Even his sword techniques became more familiar. He already had the vague appearance of a sword cultivator. But his cultivation still did not grow. Even if he had little Biao scales in his body, continuously providing immortal qi and nourishment, his cultivation seemed to be stuck at the late stage of foundation establishment. He did not move at all. Just as Lone Moon was thinking of a way to let 2 bucks grow his cultivation, Tiani brought him a piece of news. Sect competition? Lone Moon was stunned. That's right. Tiani drank a mouthful of tea and nodded. In my Guei sect, there will be a sect competition every 10 years. It is divided into 2 categories, pill refinement and spells. Of course, the most important is pill refinement. Brother Lone Moon has been in foundation establishment for a long time. Why not give it a try? Lone Moon thought about it carefully. 2 bucks had been beaten up by them too many times. He had not been beaten up by others yet. Perhaps he could really learn something by participating in this competition. But we are sword cultivators. He had never taught 2 bucks anything about pill refinement. He probably could not even pass the preliminary round. That's all right. Tiani smiled. Although our sect focuses on pill refinement, because of Supremacy I Ching's participation, we changed the format of the competition this year. Spells and pill refinement are separate. What's more, each peak master can choose 1 person to directly enter the finals. Brother Lone Moon, don't worry. I have already reported your name. You just have to focus on the competition. What? Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Why did he have to report his name all of a sudden? He did not want to participate. Didn't you have a bunch of disciples? Hee. I thank you. You're welcome. Tiani smiled proudly. This is what a brother should do. Who's a brother with you? Lone Moon sighed. Then he said, Brother Tiani, I have a favor to ask. Brother Lone Moon, please speak. Can you change my name to Zhuo Shuming's? Tiani was stunned. A moment later he looked at Lone Moon. He seemed to be filled with thousands of puzzlement and resentment. Lone Moon's hair stood on end. Wait a minute. What's with that aggrieved expression? And what's with that so you only see Zhuo Shuming as a brother look? I am a proper businessman. Don't make things up for yourself. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.